Chapter 2014. When Zhu Chenghe walked past the ice wall, Xiao Hua was dumbstruck by the scene in front of him. On the other side of the ice wall was another slanted stone wall. However, it was covered in red lava. There was even dark red lava quietly flowing on it. This scene was no different from the Flame Forest Mountains. Looking at the middle of the two stone walls, there was an open area about 10 feet wide. It was flourishing with flowers and lush with spirit herbs. The verdant vegetation formed a green barrier, dividing the fiery red and snow white into two. Heavenly yin grass. Xiao Hua looked over and found the heavenly yin grass in the center of the spiritual herbs. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Don't be anxious." Zhu Chenghe said in a low voice, "This is the intersection of yin and yang. Two different kinds of spiritual energy of heaven and earth are mixed here. It is very strange. According to the records of the sect, there is a two-headed spirit snake breeding here." Two-headed spirit snake? Xiao Hua thought for a moment and understood. The nature of the two-headed spirit snake was lustful. One of them was yang while the other was yin. The toxicity of the two snakes was naturally divided into yin and yang. If one was bitten by only one snake, it would be dangerous. If one was bitten by two snakes at the same time, the yin and yang snake venom would work together. Even a nascent soul and spirit-severing cultivator would have a hard time keeping their life. Martial Uncle Zhen Qing, this is a matter of life and death. Why didn't you record it down? Xiao Hua laughed bitterly in his heart. I promised Manor Lord Chen to let her pick a few more spiritual herbs. Therefore, I made some preparations. Zhu Chenghe said, however, my methods are not good enough. I can only confuse the two-headed snake for a few breaths. Xiao Hua, if you want to pick the heavenly yin grass, you have to be faster. Thank you, senior. Xiao Hua let out a big breath. He was very glad that he was able to come. Otherwise, with Chen Yi's personality and temper, how could she waste time on spiritual herbs that were unrelated to her? Wait a moment. Wait for my command. Zhu Chenghe cautiously walked close to the green barrier and didn't dare to move forward. With a clap of his hand, he took out a crimson incense stick from his bosom. He twirled it with his 2 fingers and a thin wisp of smoke came out of it. The smoke was also strange. After rising about a foot into the air, it began to dissipate in circles. Zhu Chenghe waved his hand, and the incense stick landed in front of his feet, at the edge of the green barrier. Then, he reached into his robes and took out 2 bronze willow leaves. He carefully placed them near the incense stick. Then, Zhu Chenghe quietly walked to the other side of the incense stick, and Chen Yi and the others followed him. Sha! Zhu Chenghe whispered, this celestial silkworm phase is made from a kind of fragrant silkworm excrement, which attracts poisonous insects the most. The thin silk leaves are also the favorite of the double-headed snake, thin silk jin. Chen Yi exclaimed in a low voice, fellow Daoist Zhu, is this the legendary thin thread jin that can paralyze Mo Jiao for 10 breaths? Yes, that's right, this is it. Zhu Chenghe lowered his voice and said, if we want to pass through here, we have to face the double-headed snake. If we had magical power, everything would be easy. But now, we can only do this. Then, he glanced at Xiao Hua and said, although the thin silk leaves can paralyze Mo Jiao for 10 breaths, it may not be able to paralyze the double-headed snake for 10 breaths. But, I don't know how much it can paralyze the double-headed snake. Anyway, we don't need to pick up the spiritual herbs. We just need to pass through here, and a few breaths will be enough. Villa Master Chen and Xiao Hua, you have to be careful. Sure, over there, the double-headed snake is coming out. Zhu Chenghe stopped talking and pointed his finger. Sure enough, in the middle of the green barrier where Zhu Chenghe was, there was a rustling sound coming from the green grass, and the spiritual herbs swayed slightly. Then, a red and white snake, about a foot long and as thick as a chopstick, raised its head from the spiritual herb. Sure enough, it had 2 heads. One of them was so white that it was almost transparent, while the other was as red as fire. The eyes on both heads were pitch black, and the 2 snake tongues were rapidly flicking in and out of the snake's mouth. Moreover, the 2 tongues were looking in the direction of Zhu Chenghe and the others. They were even swimming toward Zhu Chenghe and the others. Hiss! Xie Zhiqian took a breath of cold air and moved back a little. Then, he saw Zhu Chenghe standing there motionlessly, and his face was slightly red. He saw the double-headed snake swim to the edge of the green barrier, and it seemed to be afraid of the ice on this side. It hesitated for a moment, then stopped and spat out its tongue at Zhu Chenghe and the others with a hissing sound. Zhu Chenghe only calmly watched and didn't move. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the double-headed snake suddenly turned its head, as if it had smelled the heavenly silkworm fragrance. It very excitedly twisted its two heads and swam over at an extremely fast speed. In about 5 breaths of time, it reached the side of the thin strand. 5 breaths of time. If the thin strands had 5 or even 8 breaths of time, they would have enough time to pick a few spiritual herb. Xiao Hua secretly calculated while watching. Facing the 2 thin strands, the double-headed snake actually had enough vigilance. It didn't immediately swallow the 2 leaves like Xiao Hua had thought. Instead, it stretched out its snake head and carefully looked. It even turned its head and looked in the direction of Xiao Hua and the others. Then, it swallowed the thin strands into its stomach. Let's go. Seeing that the double-headed snake had swallowed the thin thread, its upright snake head became slightly limp. Both snake heads crawled and its pitch-black snake eyes closed. Zhu Chenghe let out a low roar. He took the lead and strode into the green spirit grass. Then, he ran towards the opposite side of the spirit grass that was 1 zhong away. Xiao Hua had already prepared his power. When he heard Zhu Chenghe's voice, he rushed towards the heavenly yin grass. Although he had already concealed it, the ethereal steps was unknowingly used. Like moving clouds and flowing water, he easily arrived in front of the heavenly yin grass. Then, with a wave of his hand, the devil spear's tip appeared in his hand. Swish, swish, swish. Not only was the heavenly yin grass uprooted, but the other spiritual herbs beside it were also pulled out along with the soil. Then, Xiao Hua waved his hand, and the spiritual herbs were stored into the space. At this time, Zhu Chenghe and the others had already run to the edge of the green barrier. Xiao Hua slightly tilted his head. When he looked at the double-headed snake, the double-headed snake had already gradually stood upright and turned its head to look at them. Ayo, it's actually only 4 breaths. Xiao Hua was startled. He didn't have time to pick up the other spiritual herbs. His feet slipped, and he ran behind Zhu Chenghe and the others. Behind him, the double-headed snake was swimming rapidly among the spiritual herbs. It was really like lightning as it rushed towards Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua's ethereal steps was really powerful. Although he was still some distance away from the green barrier, his figure was like a wisp of smoke, swaying above the spiritual herbs. In a few breaths, he reached the edge. Just as his feet left the barrier, the double-headed snake pounced. The 2 snake heads stretched out and bit the place where Xiao Hua's heels had just left. Good. Zhu Chenghe couldn't help but shout. Chen Yi, who was beside Xiao Hua, was also gasping for breath as she escaped from the barrier at the same time as Xiao Hua. However, Xiao Hua was blocking in front of her, so the double-headed snake didn't attack Chen Yi. Xiao Hua let out a long breath and patted his chest. Chen Yi's face was also deathly pale as she stroked her towering chest. Xiao Hua, your movement technique is somewhat strange. It seems somewhat similar to the so-called innate martial Tao of the Dawn Rain continent. Zhu Chenghe asked with a slight frown. Good, I'll let Senior Zhu know. Xiao Hua said with a smile, before this junior refined qi, I had indeed practiced martial arts for a few days. I didn't expect that I would actually be able to use it here. Oh, so that's how it is. Zhu Chenghe nodded and seemed to be somewhat pensive. I didn't expect that you still had a trick up your sleeve. Chen Yi sneered at the side, I only picked a stalk of silver feather flower. Not only did you pick the sky yin grass, you even picked the harmony grass and the twin fruit. Your harvest is quite bountiful. Hihi, Xiao Hua laughed and clapped his hands. He took out a spiritual herb that he didn't recognize and handed it to Chen Yi, saying, this junior was just passing by and gave it to Villa Master Chen. Many thanks to Villa Master Chen for giving this junior this opportunity. Yen, that's more like it. Chen Yi took the spiritual herb and said with a smile. Xiao Hua understands martial arts. This is actually good news. Zhu Chenghe said with a smile, it will be of great use in a while. Xiao Hua's heart gave birth to a trace of a bad feeling. However, he could only brace himself and say, "This junior's seniors have helped a lot. If I can help, this junior will do his best to help." "Of course you have to do your best," Zhu Chenghe said with a smile. "We have been preparing for several years. You have benefited greatly by following us. How can you not do your best?" Then, he turned to Chong Yefeng and said, "Fellow Daoist Chong, now that we are here, it should be time for you to receive it." Chong Yefeng nodded and glanced around the lava. He frowned and said, "My fellow cultivator Zhu, you didn't say that we couldn't use our magic power and spiritual thoughts in this place. Therefore, I took the heavenly mirror without hesitation. However, this area is very wide. Without the support of magic power and divine sense, how can I find the hidden cave? Clear sky mirror." These 3 words were like thunder in Xiao Hua's ears. However, after the thunder passed, Xiao Hua's mind was blank again. It seemed that he couldn't remember anything at all. This young master seems to have a magic tool called the clear sky mirror before. This magic tool, is this young master's? Where did Chong Yefeng get this young master's magic tool? Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and looked at Chong Yefeng. It seemed that Chong Yefeng was his enemy. Heh. Zhu Chenghe heard Chong Yefeng's words and only laughed. He said, "Of course I know there are some difficulties. Otherwise, I wouldn't have found fellow Daoist Chong, right? In fact, there are many magic tools similar to the clear sky mirror on the Dawn Rain continent. Fellow Daoist Chong was the first person I thought of. Perhaps it's fate between fellow Daoist Chong and the sword spirit." "Okay." Chong Yefeng clapped his hands and took out a square magic tool about 1 foot in size. He smiled bitterly and said, "Fellow Daoist Zhu, you'd better find a smaller area, no problem. Fellow Daoists, please follow me," Zhu Chenghe said and led the group to the right. At this moment, there was a man and a woman standing beside the ice spring that Xiao Hua and the others used to enter the 3rd level. -8. Chapter 2015. There were 2 cultivators beside the cold spring. The man was tall and thin, with bright eyes and sword-like eyebrows. The lines on his face were as if they were carved by a knife. He was abnormally stern. The woman had a graceful figure, delicate features, and a heroic spirit. She was far from being comparable to Chen Yi's bearing. The 2 people stood there very straight. Although they were not on guard, there was a kind of coldness and a kind of sword intent on their bodies. They were like 2 sharp swords that had been unsheathed. It seemed that they were not inferior to the coldness that had rushed into the space. These 2 people were actually swordsmen Duan Yuming and Wang Shuyao from the Huan country's Huan sword sect. However, at this time, the sword intent on their bodies was much more restrained than when they first came from the Huan country to the Meng country. It was obviously the result of their great improvement in cultivation. The 2 people seemed to have stood there for a long time. Wang Shuyao was a little impatient. She looked at the hole where the cold spring disappeared and said in a low voice, "Senior Marshal Brother, I'm afraid they have already gone. They won't be guarding inside. We should go in early. Otherwise, if we lose track of them, we will have come in vain." "Junior Marshal Sister, don't be anxious." Duan Yuming stared at the coldness in the hole and frowned slightly. He said calmly, "When we entered the 2nd layer just now, we were a little careless. We were actually discovered by that Foundation establishment brat. Although he didn't find our tracks, he must have already told those gold core cultivators. Although they didn't come out to look for us, I'm afraid they have already set up a trap under this hole and are waiting for us to fall. Let's wait a little longer. We should have killed that little Foundation establishment stage cultivator with a single sword strike. He's just a shield. Just now, he lured the sky-piercing vine away and was lucky enough to escape. If we kill him, those golden core stage cultivators won't necessarily know." Wang Shuyao said coldly. "That little Foundation establishment brat's hands and feet are not weak. There is a hint of sword Dao. Our sword origin is restricted. If we are careless and leak our tracks, we will wake up those gold core cultivators. Wouldn't all our previous efforts be wasted?" Duan Yuming shook his head slightly. They are just a few gold core cultivators. Just kill them all." Wang Shuyao was still unconvinced. We've killed more than 1 or 2 Jindan stage cultivators in the past few years in the cultivation world. Now that we've entered the 3rd grade of the illusory sword realm, wouldn't killing a few Jindan stage cultivators be as easy as lifting a finger? Duan Yumming stared at the spirit herbs in front of him thoughtfully, then he replied, Sword cultivator, it's true that we improve through battles. If we were in Huan Kingdom, unless we were fighting with millions of Meng mountains, how could we improve our cultivation base so quickly? However, it is precisely because we have killed so many cultivators that I fear some nascent soul cultivators will want to kill us. No way. Wang Shuyao was slightly taken aback. We were extremely careful when we killed them. If they were from a big sect, we definitely wouldn't provoke them. Only small sects would make a move. Moreover, once we made a move, we definitely wouldn't leave anyone alive. It's impossible for them to have a hold on us. Besides, would those nascent soul cultivators dare to attack us? Aren't you afraid of incurring the enmity of us sword cultivators? Wang Shuyao said disdainfully. That's true. Duan Yumming laughed. They're probably afraid of harming us. Bah, you're the rat. Wang Shuyao spat and scolded jokingly. Hee hee. A hint of sweetness appeared on Duan Yumming's face. He didn't retort, but explained again, it's not that I don't want to kill those golden core cultivators. Look at this hole and the spirit herbs beside it. It must be some powerful restriction. We don't know anything about this place, but they've been preparing for several years. Why don't we let them lead the way? When they find Senior Li Shoubai's 9 stars transverse sun sword spirit, wouldn't it be better for us to be the mantises chasing after the cicadas? Tilda senior brother, why don't we be the Oriole? Wang Shuyao spat a few more times and said. Duan Yumming smiled foolishly. Junior sister, whatever you say. Wang Shuyao looked at the hole under her feet and sneered again. These cultivators are really delusional. Although we're all sword cultivators, how can the sword spirit of us sword cultivators compare to the flying swords of cultivators? They're indulging in fantasy. Can they practice flying swords just because they obtained the sword spirit? Can they have the attack of us sword cultivators? Can they compete with us sword cultivators? That's true. Duan Yumming smiled apologetically. How would they know that the sword spirit is loyal to the person who nurtured it? It's useless for others to take it. The most precious thing that Senior Li Shoubai left here isn't the 9 sword spirits, but his 9 stars transverse sun sword intent. Cultivators only know about magic power, how would they know about sword intent? Even if they obtained Senior Li Shoubai's sword pill, they can't get the sword intent in it. Wang Shuyao said coldly. They can only let the sword pill gather dust. Casting pearls before swine. That's right. Duan Yumming's handsome face was filled with respect. The seniors of Flame Bamboo Sword sect searched for a long time in Meng, but they didn't expect Senior Li Shoubai's sword pill to land in Shi. If not for us being lucky and hearing someone asking about the refinement of the sword pill, we wouldn't have been able to find out that these little golden core cultivators were actually coveting Senior Li Shoubai's sword pill. The problem is that they really found the location of the sword pill. Wang Shuyao nodded. And the place that they found was exactly the same as the place that the seniors of Shen Sword Sect had predicted. Now that we've met them and followed them for so many years, we can't help but say that it's fate. It's Senior Li Shoubai's spirit in heaven that protected us. Duan Yumming echoed. This 9 stars transverse sun sword intent still belongs to the sword cultivators of my Huan country. Naturally, if not for Senior Li Shoubai's spirit in heaven, how would we have accidentally searched that Foundation establishment female cultivator's soul that day? Wang Shuyao's face showed a trace of excitement. If not for the soul search, how would we know that this cultivator called Zhu Chenghe was looking for the refinement method of the sword pill? If not for finding this Zhu Chenghe, how would we have followed him to Flame Bamboo Sword Sect? I believe that this guy still hasn't thought that the one who told him the refinement method of the sword pill was this sword's arrangement. Otherwise, how would a cultivator like him be able to find out the refinement method of the sword pill so easily? That's right, even if it was the secret place where they gathered, it was also hard for us to find it. This Zhu Chenghe has a lot of evasion spells, he almost escaped. Duan Yumming still agreed. This is also junior sister's intuition. I admire it very much. That's for sure. Wang Shuyao was a little proud. My intuition has always been shocking. It's not like I haven't told you before. The ink storm in the Black Forest lasted for almost a year. If not for me by your side, I'm afraid that you would have long given up, right? Yes, junior sister is right. Duan Yumming replied. The ink storm was so rampant, how could a few golden core cultivators survive? Moreover, because of this, we lost track of their whereabouts. In such a huge black forest, how could we find them? That day, I was indeed abnormally depressed. -8. Chapter 2016. It's useless to be depressed and kill a few cultivators to vent your anger. Wang Shuyao smiled. Her curved eyes were like crescent moons. My intuition tells me that they'll definitely escape and enter again, and the place that I'm thinking of isn't too far off, right? Duan Yumming gave her a thumbs up and praised, junior sister is indeed wise. That Zhu Chenghe is gone, but Chen Yi and the rest are still there. If we tail them, wouldn't it be the same as finding Zhu Chenghe? Speaking of this, Duan Yumming frowned again and said, but I still feel that something is wrong. Ah, why? Wang Shuyao asked curiously. I don't feel it. Could it be that we've been discovered by them? That little foundation establishment. Duan Yumming shook his head and said, the one called Xiao Hua is a little strange. Mo Bao is so big, but he's completely fine. The sky-climbing vine is also very powerful. Even you and I have to retreat, but he still managed to escape. It's really strange. Senior brother, you're right. Wang Shuyao nodded, and a trace of seriousness appeared on her face. I also have a trace of doubt in my heart. However, Wang Shuyao immediately raised her head and proudly said, even if he's concealed his cultivation, he's nothing compared to the two of us sword cultivators who possess offensive power close to that of a nascent soul cultivator. Senior brother, don't worry. When we go in later, it's fine if he dies. If he dies, we can use the one-heart sword technique and kill him. Millimeter, when you and I find the sword intent of the 9 stars soaring sun, our cultivation will soon break through to sword transformation realm. It won't be a waste for us to stay in the cultivation world for so many years. Duan Yumming looked at Wang Shuyao with affection in his eyes. Sigh, it's a pity that there's no news of Yu Tong and Yu He. Wang Shuyao sighed and said, we only found Yu Tong's flying sword and nothing else. We can't explain it to the sword master. He. It doesn't matter. As long as we don't find their whereabouts, as long as we don't return to the Huan sword sect, we'll be a fugitive, Mandarin duck in the cultivation world. Duan Yumming gritted his teeth and seemed to say these words word by word. Wang Shuyao was obviously stunned. She stared at Duan Yumming for a long time, and tears welled up in her eyes. Her 2 small hands clenched tightly as she muttered, Senior brother. These words. You finally said them. This little sister. I thought I would never hear them in this lifetime. He. Duan Yumming's face was flushed red again, as if he had drunk a lot of spirit wine. I was afraid that you would reject me. How could this little sister reject you? Wang Shuyao was also abnormally shy. She said in a low voice, this little sister was afraid that senior brother would make things difficult for you, so I didn't dare. When you and I obtain sword intent and cultivate to the sword transformation stage. Duan Yumming suddenly realized something when he spoke up to hear. Wang Shuyao also realized something, and a happy smile appeared in her eyes. She pointed her finger and said, Senior martial brother, let's not talk about it anymore. We should go down earlier and see if those golden core cultivators have already found Senior Li Shoubai's 9 stars transit of the sun. Yes, junior sister, come with me. As he spoke, Duan Yumming stretched out his hand. Wang Shuyao hesitated for a moment before reaching out her hand. The two shook hands. In front of the lava, Xiao Hua and the rest followed Zhu Chenghe around a corner. It was as if they were walking on the rugged bottom of a valley, and they came to a place where there were no bumps and depressions. Zhu Chenghe stood there and stared at it for a long time. Then, he shook his head and walked to another place. He looked again and still shook his head. After a few times, Xie Zhiqian asked in a low voice, Fellow Daoist Zhu, is there no suitable place? I won't hide it from fellow Daoist Xie. How could it be so easy to find the place where Li Shoubai and Daoist Master Brightsword fought? Zhu Chenghe smiled bitterly. This is just my own guess. If it could be found so quickly, I'm afraid that the previous seniors would have already found it. En. Xie Zhiqian said no more. He knew that Zhu Chenghe was telling the truth. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Zhu Chenghe was somewhat dejected. He clenched his teeth and said, I really can't find any trace of it. As for the clear sky mirror, it seems that I can only let fellow Daoist Chong use it once. I have no choice but to risk my life. As he spoke, Zhu Chenghe took out a palm-sized, purple-colored octagonal disc from his bosom. He said, I obtained this from the Huan country. It is said that it can be used to detect sword essence. However, I don't have sword essence, so I can't use it. I can only use my blood to activate it, and the range is limited. When Qiong Yefeng and the others heard this, their faces unconsciously showed respect. They all nodded and said, Thank you, fellow Daoist Zhu. Okay. Zhu Chenghe took out a scarlet spirit pill from his bosom and put it into his mouth without hesitation. His face quickly turned dark red. Zhu Chenghe threw the octagonal disc into the air. Zhu Chenghe spat out a mouthful of blood onto the disc. When the disc was stained with blood, it immediately emitted a layer of light. This light was different from the light of ordinary magic treasures. It was like a fluorescent light, like flowing water. Moreover, there was a threatening coldness that was like a sharp sword piercing through his skin. Zhu Chenghe immediately took out a sword-shaped talisman from his bosom. He used his left hand to force out the magic power from the spirit pill, and the talisman shone brightly, transforming into the shape of a small sword. Go! Zhu Chenghe scolded softly. The small sword in his hand flew out and entered the octagonal plate. Woo-woo tilde a buzzing sound came from the octagonal plate, and the brilliance of the octagonal plate became more and more dazzling. Then, Zhu Chenghe spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood onto the octagonal disc. Zhu Chenghe's face was pale, and the octagonal disc turned purple. Buzz tilde with a buzzing sound, the light on the octagonal disc suddenly disappeared. A little sword light appeared from the center of the octagonal disc. The sword light instantly increased in size and turned into the shape of the small sword that just fell into the octagonal disc. At this time, Zhu Chenghe's body was slightly trembling. His hand that was holding the octagonal disc seemed to be holding a boulder as it slightly tilted down. Kaye. Another sound was heard. Like a sword being unsheathed, the small sword finally flew out from the octagonal disc. The tail of the small sword still had a trace of brilliance that was connected to the octagonal disc. Quick! Follow the small sword. Zhu Chenghe saw the small sword rush out and fly to the other side of the lava. He quickly caught up and ordered Xiao Hua. Yes. Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. His feet moved, and sure enough, he was a step faster than Xie Zhiqian and the others. He was the first to grab the lava, but that small sword was even faster. It streaked across the air with a crimson brilliance and disappeared into a crack. Although Xiao Hua was a bit slower, he still saw the place where the small sword disappeared. When he arrived at the crack, he couldn't help but be stunned. This was where the 2 streams of lava intersected. The gap was about the width of a finger, and it led straight to the top of the stone wall. Vaguely, there was some light shining through it, but there was nothing special about it at all. After Xiao Hua looked around, Chen Yi and the others caught up. Zhu Chenghe was actually the last. It's here. Chen Yi didn't seem to believe it. After all, it was really a crack. Yes, I saw the small sword fly in here. Xiao Hua nodded. However, I don't know where it landed. Good. Zhu Chenghe praised. He put the octagonal disc into his arms and said to Qiong Yefeng with a smile, Fellow Daoist Qiong, your clear sky mirror should be able to cover this area, right? It should be able to. Qiong Yefeng nodded. He also took out a scarlet pill and swallowed it. As the pill's efficacy increased, Qiong Yefeng tossed the supreme sky mirror into the air. It let out a clear ring and flashed with a swamp light. Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and stared at the magic treasure. The corners of his mouth moved slightly. No one knew what he was thinking. Similarly, Qiong Yefeng was also chanting. His hands were constantly making complicated seals, and he hit the clear sky mirror one after another. As the seals were hit, the clear sky mirror's brilliance didn't increase. Instead, it became dimmer and dimmer. Even the edges of the mirror began to disappear. The surface of the mirror was originally clear and there was no image. Now, it was slowly reflecting the surrounding scenery. Oh no! Seeing that Chong Yefeng's seals were getting slower and slower, and the clear sky mirror was still not completely hidden. The scenery on the mirror was still very clear. Chong Yefeng gritted his teeth and spat a mouthful of essence blood on the clear sky mirror. Buzz buzz, a loud sound was heard. It was louder than the sound of the octagonal disc. The entire clear sky mirror emitted a dazzling clear light. In the clear light, the clear sky mirror's shape completely disappeared, leaving only a round mirror surface. The mirror surface reflected the surrounding scarlet lava. Oh, I understand. Seeing the scarlet surface of the clear sky mirror, Xiao Hua suddenly realized that the clear sky mirror was the same as his Dharma eyes. It should be able to see the fluctuations of the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. That was why it could see the location of the duel between Li Shoubai and immortal Ming Jian. Chong Yefeng waved his hand weakly, and the mirror surface of the clear sky mirror flew into his hand. Chong Yefeng pushed his hand. Through the fiery red mirror surface, a round object about the height of a person appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Quick! Just as Zhu Chenghe and the others were delighted, Chong Yefeng forcefully shouted again. A faint, indistinct green light was emitted from the mirror surface and hit the round object. Swish! Like rainwater rushing through the lava in front of them, ripples flashed on the lava. In a moment, a cave identical to the one on the clear sky mirror appeared in front of everyone. Great! Zhu Chenghe clapped his hands and said, "The clear sky mirror is so magical. I really didn't expect that fellow Daoist Chong would save my Dharma Chi." Cough cough. Chong Yefeng put away the clear sky mirror and said with a bitter smile, "Fellow Daoist Zhu has already spent a lot of effort just now. This time, it's my turn to help. Otherwise, I won't have the face to take the sword pill." Hearing this, Xie Zhiqian's face was slightly unnatural. -8. Chapter 2017. Let's go, we'll go in. Zhu Chenghe waved his hand and glanced at Xiao Hua. "Xiao Hua, we're a bit exhausted right now, so our physical strength can't compare to yours. You lead the way. If there's an extra sword spirit, I'll give you one. How about it?" Xiao Hua shook his head with a bitter smile. "Senior, thank you for your kindness. I can lead the way, but I don't want that sword spirit boy. After all, I don't know how to use a flying sword." "Okay, go ahead. I'll compensate you." Chen Yi nodded. "We Jindan stage seniors won't let you suffer losses." "Yes." Xiao Hua bowed and was about to enter the cave. "Xiao Hua, where's the otherworldly item you got from the Feather Immortal Assembly?" Chen Yi suddenly asked. "Ah!" Xiao Hua was taken aback. Then, he smiled apologetically. "I'll let Villa Master Chen know. That thing is really too heavy. I can't put it in my storage bag. Moreover, I can't carry it with me. Therefore, I put it in the Myriad Thunder Valley." Chen Yi's beautiful eyes looked at Xiao Hua, not saying anything. On the other hand, Xiao Hua's heart skipped a beat. He had told Chen Yi many things, but he hadn't said anything important. Xiao Hua had a guilty conscience about the Great Wisdom Heavy Sword, so he hadn't said anything. However, he didn't expect that. Chen Yi actually knew about it. At this moment, Xiao Hua was a bit regretful. Thinking about the Feather Immortal Assembly, the Great Wisdom Sword, and the matter of Fairy Hongxia. Damn it. Xiao Hua's scalp went numb when he thought about it. The Feather Immortal Assembly is held once every 10 years. The 3 cultivation kingdoms of the Dawn Rain continent have held it countless times. Could it be that Chen Yi really went to inquire about it? Alas, I really can't lie too much. Every time I lie, I have to use 10 or even 100 lies to cover it up. If this continues, this lie will eventually be exposed. Forget it. Seeing that Chen Yi didn't ask any more questions, Xiao Hua braced himself and walked inside. Zhu Chenghe frowned and turned to look at Chen Yi. However, Chen Yi ignored him. Zhu Chenghe had no choice but to ignore her. After Xie Zhiqian and Xiao Hua, the group of 5 entered the cave. The inside of the cave was very tranquil, and a slight heat was surging in. His divine sense still couldn't be used, but a faint light penetrated from the distance. Xiao Hua walked cautiously, and he didn't encounter any danger. Of course, in such a dangerous place, how could Xiao Hua not open his left hand's delirium eyes? In his transcendence vision, everything outside the cave was fiery red, but there was nothing wrong with the inside of the cave. Just like the soft footsteps in his ears, everything was normal. As they walked to the center of the cave, faint rumbling sounds could be heard from the end of the cave. Xiao Hua was startled and raised his head. At the same time, he also raised his transcendence vision. He saw that not far away, at the end of the cave, there were flashes of red light falling down. "That's it!" Zhu Chenghe exclaimed in surprise. Everyone, including Xiao Hua, quickened their steps. When they reached the end and looked to the left, everyone was overjoyed. At the end of the cave was lava. Looking to the left, there was a huge space. Inside the space, there was a faint skylight coming from somewhere, illuminating the entire space. "Sword case," Zhu Chenghe blurted out and pointed. Sure enough, in the center of the space, there was a 3 feet long and 3 inches wide sword case on top of a bulging rock. "Sword pill." Qiong Yefeng also laughed. Beside the sword case, there were several sword pills with cracks on them. These sword pills were different in size, and they were exactly the same as the one Xiao Hua was refining. 8. It's really 8. Chen Yi was beaming with joy. If we add fellow Daoist Jews, it'll be 9. These 8 sword pills are just as we planned, 2 for each of us. That's strange. Where's that buzzing sound just now? Xiao Hua asked in surprise. These sword pellets had a sword spirit. Xiao Hua had long wanted to find a sword spirit and see what it was. These sword pellets were definitely a great temptation to him. However, he still didn't dare to be too impatient. "Wait," Zhu Chenghe said in a low voice. He looked around and said in a low voice, "It's a bit strange. Why is there no protection in such an important place?" However, everyone stood outside the space for a moment. The entire space was quiet. Where was the buzzing sound? "Xiao Hua, I asked you just now. Are you willing to help us?" Zhu Chenghe said solemnly, "As you can see, we've been preparing for several years. We've spent a lot of spirit stones and energy. If you can bring those sword pills over, this penniless Daoist will give them to you. Furthermore, this penniless Daoist will give you the sword pill and also give you the manual to cultivate the flying sword. This." Xiao Hua looked hesitant and pretended to hesitate. "Xiao Hua, if we don't get those sword pills, we won't go out," Chen Yi said with a smile. "You can choose not to help, or you can have other plans. But if we all die here, can you afford to leave? Moreover, if you don't go." Chen Yi said no more, but the threat was self-evident. Hearing Chen Yi's threat, Xiao Hua was unhappy. He looked at the 4 people and muttered. If he relied on his physical body, he could probably resist 2 or 4 people. However, he didn't have the kind of spirit pill that Zhu Chenghe took. If 2 of them took a spirit pill that stimulated magic power at the same time, he definitely wouldn't be their opponent. "Xiao Hua, my vitality has been greatly injured. Otherwise, I would have gone this time." Qiong Yefeng stepped forward and said with a smile, "Actually, fellow Daoist Xiao invited your sect's master Zhen Yi that day to use the speed of your sect's lightning escape technique to get those sword pills. This junior understands." Xiao Hua frowned, then turned to Zhu Chenghe and said, "Junior can go and give it a try. However, I would like to ask Senior to tell me about the danger in detail. Otherwise, Junior will be confused and might lose his life." Cough cough. Zhu Chenghe knew what Xiao Hua was referring to. He coughed twice and said, "Xiao Hua, you are a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Your status is different from ours. Although your cultivation is low, we have to be on guard against you. Perhaps you can understand everything that happened before. As for the danger now." Zhu Chenghe pointed at the sword pills and sword sheath and said, "These are probably Master Brightsword's flying swords and Senior Li Shoubai's sword pills. Since they are placed there, there must be a restriction around them. We don't have divine sense, and our magic power can only be activated for a moment. Right now, there isn't much difference between you and us. If you can take those sword pills, I can also give them to you. Manor Lord Chen and the others will be convinced, don't you think? Xiao Hua squinted his eyes and looked at the stone. He seemed to be thinking about it, but in reality, he had already opened his Dharma eyes and carefully examined the side of the stone. Then, he sighed and said, all right, since all of you think so highly of this junior, then this junior can only help all of you. However, senior must give the sword orb to this junior. -8. Chapter 2018. Hihi, since you're so worried, I'll give it to you now. Zhu Chenghe took out the sword pill from his bosom and threw it to Xiao Hua. Oh! Xiao Hua didn't expect Zhu Chenghe to be so forthright, but his heart was at ease. After all, from what he saw with his Dharma eye, there was nothing beside the stone, and there were no restrictions. He only needed to go over and pick up the sword pellet. There was no danger at all. On the contrary, the 8 small and sharp lights inside the sword pellet and the red flying sword lights inside the sword sheath made Xiao Hua really happy. Zhu Chenghe was right. These were the flying swords and sword pills left behind by Master Brightsword and Li Shoubai. This is the sword pill. Xiao Hua took it and pretended to be curious. Zhu Chenghe said unhappily, Xiao Hua, you should go over and try it. You can't expect me to give you the sword art right now, right? Hihi, there's no need. Xiao Hua smiled and put the sword pill into his bosom. He said with a smile, Senior knows how to give Junior a medicinal pill that promotes magic power. Junior will use the flying technique to give those sword pills to Senior. Zhu Chenghe smiled bitterly. That's for gold core cultivators to use. Your meridians are weak, so you can't use it. Chen Yi glanced at Zhu Chenghe and clapped her hands. She took out a jade bottle and handed it to Xiao Hua. She said, this is the bamboo marrow of Yulon bamboo. Although it can't be compared to the spirit pill you want, it's better in terms of its calmness. You can use it with your foundation establishment cultivation. Hee, just keep it in your mouth and swallow it when you need it. I hope you won't need it. Many thanks, Manor Head Chen. Xiao Hua received it with a smile. Then, he held the jade bottle in his hand and a drop of the jade-like liquid emitting a faint bamboo fragrance dripped into his mouth. Then, Xiao Hua stepped towards the sword pill on the stone and held the jade bottle in his hand. He was still waiting to take the sword pill and put the bamboo marrow into the jade bottle. Moreover, Xiao Hua even muttered in his heart. Should he take away all the sword pills and not leave a single one for Zhu Chenghe and the others? After all, with this drop of bamboo marrow, Xiao Hua had enough confidence to kill these 4 people. Seeing Xiao Hua carefully walk into the stone, Zhu Chenghe and the other 3's faces showed nervousness. However, unlike Chong Yefeng and Xie Zhiqian's nervousness, Zhu Chenghe and Chen Yi's eyes still had some anxiety. The 2 of them even tilted their heads slightly and looked at each other. However, when Xiao Hua walked to the edge of the rock, there was still no movement. Xiao Hua stopped and stretched out his left hand. After looking at it for a moment, he turned his head and said with a smile, Senior Zhu, I'm afraid this junior will have to take advantage of you. As he spoke, he stretched out his hand to take the sword pellets, while Chen Yi's face revealed a trace of disappointment. But it just so happened that right at this moment, the buzzing sound that everyone heard just now suddenly rang out. Xiao Hua was stunned, and he hurriedly raised his left hand to meet the eye. An extremely brilliant red light flashed past, and even his eye couldn't help but close. Ah! Hearing the exclamations of Zhu Chenghe and the rest, Xiao Hua immediately knew that the situation was bad. A crimson-red sword light was born from the sword sheath beside the sword pellet, and a fierce sharpness and intimidating aura instantly enveloped Xiao Hua. Shit! Xiao Hua didn't expect that the flying sword from the sword sheath would suddenly attack. While he was greatly alarmed, he immediately swallowed the jade essence into the air. Instantly, a warm current flowed through his meridians like true essence. Xiao Hua urged his magic power without hesitation and immediately used the bright thunder escape. In addition to the misty steps under his feet, his entire body flew to the side. However, Xiao Hua had just urged his magic power, and his body had only moved 3 feet when the true essence formed by the jade essence suddenly disappeared. His magic power flowed out, and Xiao Hua's body naturally stagnated for a moment. At this moment, the sword light that was more than 3 feet long chopped at the top of Xiao Hua's head. Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed, and his feet staggered in succession, wanting to block this mountain-like sword light. Unfortunately, that sword light was set up by Daoist Master Bright Sword. That was a flying sword of a nascent soul cultivator, and it was the work of great magic power. If Xiao Hua had the bright thunder escape, he might still have a chance. But now, how could he dodge it by relying on misty steps, this kind of extreme movement technique? Seeing the incomparable sword light chopping down at a speed that Xiao Hua couldn't think of, Xiao Hua held the great wisdom sword in his hand without hesitation and raised it up, wanting to block the flying sword. But with a loud dang, the sword light above Xiao Hua's head was blocked. A huge force was transmitted to Xiao Hua's body, and then to his feet. A shining crack appeared under Xiao Hua's feet. At the same time, the tip of the red sword light suddenly bent down like a soft sword, and the speed at which it chopped down was twice as fast as before. Xiao Hua simply didn't have time to dodge. With a pu sound, it neatly chopped his back. A burst of brilliance flashed, and Xiao Hua's protective spirit armor was only able to resist for a moment before it was split into two by that incomparable sword light. Xiao Hua let out a heart-wrenching scream, and his entire body fell into the brilliance that appeared under his feet. Ah! The unforeseen event that Xiao Hua encountered was really too fast. That sword light flashed and disappeared. Although Xiao Hua flew for a distance, in the eyes of Zhu Chenghe and the others, it was only an instant. The brilliance of Xiao Hua's spirit armor was annihilated, and they saw it with their own eyes. Xiao Hua's heart-wrenching scream was also heard by them. Although Xiao Hua's body fell into the brilliance, they knew that Xiao Hua's body must have been split open by that incomparably sharp sword light. When his body landed on the ground, it would definitely split into two halves. After a moment, Xie Zhiqian took a deep breath, and his eyes were filled with joy. Indeed, if Xiao Hua hadn't come here, the one who would have been split into two halves by that sword light would have definitely been him. Fellow Daoist Xie. Zhu Chenghe's voice sounded by his ear again. According to our agreement, this time it should be fellow Daoist Xie's turn to step forward. This. Xie Zhiqian was a little surprised. It's fine. Chen Yi said with a smile, as long as it's an ownerless flying sword, it only has the power for one attack. Xiao Hua is dead, so naturally there won't be any danger. Don't be afraid. All right. Xie Zhiqian understood that he was similar to Xiao Hua. That is, the Fire Bat King was his effort, and everything else was arranged by Zhu Chenghe. If he didn't go, who else would go? Xie Zhiqian took out a scarlet spirit pill and put it in his mouth. Then, like Xiao Hua, he cautiously approached the sword pellet. At this moment, Xie Zhiqian didn't look at anything else but the sword case. He was prepared to wait for the sword case to change, then he would leave and flee. Fortunately, until Xie Zhiqian touched the sword pellet, the sword case didn't have any movement. That terrifying buzzing sound just now also didn't come out in the slightest. Great. Xie Zhiqian picked up a sword pellet and said with a smile, Fellow Daoist Zhu, it's fine. These 8 sword pellets are now ours. Ha ha ha. Qiong Yefeng laughed and walked to Xie Zhiqian's side. He reached out and grabbed the 2 largest sword pellets and said, there are exactly 8 of them. We each have 2, and this trip is complete. That's right, it's complete. This is the completion of our Huan country's sword cultivation. 2 cold voices came from behind Zhu Chenghe. A rainbow-like sword light and a sword light like a fish in the sea flew out at the same time. They drew a dazzling brilliance in the air and pierced towards Xie Zhiqian and Qiong Yefeng. Ah! Xie Zhiqian was shocked. He didn't have time to touch the sword pellet. He swallowed the spirit pill in his mouth and waved his hand. A meteor-like flying sword met Duan Yuming's rainbow sword. He also slapped his hand and took out a shield-like magic treasure from his storage bag. Clang! Xie Zhiqian's flying sword collided with the rainbow sword, and was immediately annihilated by the rainbow sword's sword light. Immediately after, it was knocked into the air, and the brilliance on the sword disappeared. Like a piece of scrap metal, it hit the stone wall and fell to the ground. Fellow Daoist Zhu, save me. This was Qiong Yefeng's cry for help. He had just forcefully used the clear sky mirror and his vitality was damaged. It was too late for him to take out a spirit pill. Seeing countless colorful fish surrounding him and about to drown him, he couldn't help but cry out. But just as his voice sounded, the colorful fish immediately opened their mouths and pounced on Chong Yefeng's body. Chong Yefeng's body flashed with brilliance. It was the protective brilliance and the protection of Chong Yefeng's magic treasure. Unfortunately, Wang Shuyao's attack power was comparable to that of a nascent soul stage cultivator. Although her sword origin was restrained, it was not something Chong Yefeng could resist. Puff, puff, puff. Dozens of places on Chong Yefeng's body were ruptured and blood gushed out like a fountain. At the same time, Duan Yuming's rainbow sword suddenly trembled. Like a seven-colored satin, it quickly wrapped around Xie Zhiqian from the bottom to the top. With a muffled sound, Xie Zhiqian's scream could not be heard. Blood spurted out from his neck. Xie Zhiqian's head was chopped off by the rainbow sword. Villa Head Chen, let's hurry, we definitely can't let these two sword cultivators get the sword orb. The sword cultivators' attacks were really powerful. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. Zhu Chenghe only had time to give Chen Yi an order before Chong Yefeng and Xie Zhiqian were already dead. Yes. Chen Yi heard him and her body floated up, pouncing on the sword pill. Zhu Chenghe naturally moved in another direction. Wang Shuyao and Duan Yuming sneered and also pounced on the sword pill. The two flying swords were also driven by them and suddenly turned around. But, just as the two of them flew into the air and the flying swords turned around, Zhu Chenghe and Chen Yi suddenly turned around at the same time. They actually went back to the whole of the revolving space. Hey! Duan Yuming was stunned and whispered, "Junior sister, go and kill these two people. I'll take Senior's sword pill." "Yes, Senior brother," Wang Shuyao responded and suddenly turned around. The sword light that was like a fish also followed her and chased after Zhu Chenghe and Chen Yi. "Let's go." Zhu Chenghe and Chen Yi's figures landed at the entrance of the cave. They whispered and quickly ran out of the cave. Unfortunately, even though the two of them had prepared elixirs in advance, the amount of spiritual power they could mobilize was still limited. They had just flown less than 10 feet when Wang Shuyao had already caught up. Seeing the layers of fish fiercely pouncing over, Zhu Chenghe was greatly shocked and couldn't help but shout, "Envoy, save me, ha ha ha." A rough laugh sounded from outside the cave, and a voice came, "Martial nephew Zhu has worked hard to lure these two cunning sword cultivators here. How can we bear to let you lose your life?" -8. Chapter 2019. Who is it? Wang Shuyao was shocked. Just as she was about to retrieve the swimming fish sword, two large hands flew in from outside the cave. One of the large hands slapped down with lightning speed, holding the swimming fish sword in its hand. With a slight force, all the fish were annihilated, leaving only the flying sword in the large hand, which was overflowing with brilliance. Ah! Nascent soul cultivator? Wang Shuyao was shocked. She knew that she had fallen into someone's trap. She couldn't care less about her flying sword being retrieved and turned to escape into the cave. However, the other large hand had already slapped down on Wang Shuyao's head. A fierce aura came from the large hand and shackled Wang Shuyao's body. If she had the swimming fish sword at this time, Wang Shuyao might not be powerless to fight back. She might even be able to break through the big hand. However, now that two nascent soul cultivators were attacking her at the same time, the swimming fish sword was already restrained. All her cultivation was on the flying sword. Under the big hand, she was indeed somewhat helpless. But seeing the large hand about to reach her head, Wang Shuyao's face turned ashen. She gritted her teeth and opened her cherry lips slightly. A mouthful of sword essence was spat out and attacked the large hand. At this moment, the other large hand clenched slightly and Wang Shuyao's flying sword was caught by the large hand. The entire flying sword was actually melted into the shape of a ball. Ah! A scream came from Wang Shuyao's mouth. Her sword essence also dimmed. Taking advantage of this moment, the large hand that was covering Wang Shuyao suddenly slapped down. Wang Shuyao no longer had any power to fight back and her body was slapped to the ground. "Junior sister." Hearing Wang Shuyao's scream, Duan Yuming rushed out. Seeing Wang Shuyao being slapped to the ground by the large hand of a nascent soul cultivator, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. With a wave of his hand, the rainbow sword turned into a 7-colored rainbow and rushed towards the large hand. Go! A soft shout came from the cave. The large hand picked up from the ground again and clenched into a fist to hit the rainbow sword. Poof! The rainbow sword pierced the giant hand. The giant hand shook as if it was about to collapse. Just as the giant hand flashed with brilliance, another giant hand took the opportunity to pounce from the side, and with a slap, easily covered Duan Yuming. Duan Yuming felt an unparalleled power of imprisonment. He had never thought that after scheming for so many years and following Zhu Chenghe for so many years, he would become the mantis in the end. What made his heart ache the most was that he had just confided in Wang Shuyao, and their relationship had just undergone a fundamental change, but his Wang Shuyao had already died in the hands of a nascent soul cultivator. God, why are you so unfair? Duan Yuming couldn't help but shout. The heavens are naturally fair. A tall and thin early nascent soul cultivator emerged from the cave. It was none other than the cultivator who had chased after Xiao Hua in the ink cloud black forest. The nascent soul cultivator sneered, "Do you know how many cultivators you've killed in the 3 kingdoms of cultivation? Although you've carefully chosen the cultivators you've killed, they are still cultivators of the 3 kingdoms of cultivation. How can we let you do whatever you want? Humph, don't talk so much with him. This guy is too cunning. We have searched for him many times but couldn't catch him. Now that he is here to catch a turtle in a jar, don't let him escape again." The other nascent soul cultivator's hand also flew into the air and firmly covered Duan Yuming. "How can you cultivators know the divine abilities of us sword cultivators?" Duan Yuming sneered and waved his hand. 8 sword balls flew into the air at the same time. The 2 nascent soul cultivators who were already standing beside Chen Yi and Zhu Chenghe were extremely calm. They casually rubbed their hands together, and a few faint beams of light appeared in front of the 4 of them. Puff, puff, puff. A series of noises could be heard as the 9 sword beams pierced through the beams of light. However, the beams of light only flickered, and were unable to pierce through them. The 9 streaks of sword light seemed to be exhausted as they fell from the sky. However, just as they fell half an inch, the 8 streaks of sword light once again emitted extremely brilliant sword light. Like poisonous snakes that had their tails stepped on, they rushed towards the 2 nascent soul cultivators to bite them. When the 2 nascent soul cultivators saw this, their faces were filled with astonishment. Both of them reached out their hands at the same time, as if trying to capture the sword lights. However, the 8 sword lights only paused in mid-air for a moment before rushing back into their hand. Damn it! The tall and thin nascent soul cultivator was slightly angered. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of life essence. It transformed into a 1-foot square shield in front of him. 4 of the flying swords actually destroyed the shield and stopped in mid-air like a dead fish. "This is bad, senior. That rainbow sword." Just as the tall and thin cultivator snorted coldly, he heard Chen Yi's scream. When he looked up, he didn't know when, but the rainbow sword had already flown more than 10 feet away from the ground. "Still want to run?" The tall and skinny cultivator slapped his forehead, and another large hand was about to appear. However, the rainbow sword suddenly emitted a terrifying blood-red light, and its speed suddenly increased. Before the large hand could appear, it had already rushed out of the cave. -8. Chapter 2020. This is bad. The tall and skinny cultivator didn't think too much and flew out of the cave. Unfortunately, even though he was a nascent soul cultivator, his magic power and divine sense were restricted here. By the time he flew out of the cave, the rainbow sword had already disappeared. Clap, 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 clap. A few claps sounded beside the tall and skinny cultivator. A voice said, "Senior is indeed powerful. You easily killed 2 evil sword cultivators on the spot. This merit cannot go unnoticed. I will definitely report this matter to the Alliance Master." When the tall and skinny cultivator heard this, his eyes turned slightly and a smile appeared on his face. He said to the cultivator in camouflage who had just turned around, "I don't dare." This was all planned by the emissary. It was the emissary's amazing strategy. We only did our best. Hehe, Senior is wrong. This was all planned by the Alliance Master. How could Junior dare to be greedy? The cultivator said with a smile. But the tall and skinny cultivator looked worriedly at the rainbow sword that disappeared into the distance. The emissary didn't seem to see the rainbow sword fly away. He pointed at the sword orb in the tall and skinny cultivator's hand and said, "Is that Li Shoubai's sword orb?" "Yes. If I guessed correctly, it is Li Shoubai's sword orb." The cultivator quickly replied, Duan Yuming also put it away and activated it. Its power is indeed powerful. At this moment, another nascent soul cultivator walked out with Zhu Chenghe and Chen Yi. He held another 4 sword orbs and a sword case in his hand and said, "We followed the emissary's plan and really found a place that sword cultivators covet. We didn't come here and didn't even touch the things inside for fear of arousing Duan Yuming and Wang Shuyao's suspicion. Therefore, this is the first time Martial Nephew Zhu came here. It is also the first time for us. En, to be able to set up the emissary's plan, it is all thanks to Martial Nephew Zhu. If he didn't find this place, Duan Yuming and Wang Shuyao might not have been fooled." "That's right. Shuyang School's Zhu Chenghe and Burial Flower Manor's Chen Yi, this emissary will remember them. I will definitely report everyone's merit to the Alliance Master." The emissary nodded and said, "These sword orbs, how to deal with them?" The tall and skinny nascent soul cultivator said with a smile, "Why not let the emissary take them back? This thing can be considered a rare item. Forget it. You've worked hard for so many years. How can I take away your hard work? You can split these 8 sword pellets among yourselves." The emissary waved his hand and took out a storage pouch. "This is some reward. Although it's not much, it's still a small token of appreciation from the Alliance leader. I don't dare." The tall and skinny cultivator took it and then looked at the other nascent soul cultivator. The cultivator handed the sword case to the messenger and smiled. "This is the flying sword of Daoist Bright Sword of the Changbai sect. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for us to take it, so please handle it yourself." "Well, this thing is indeed a bit troublesome. Let I handle it." The emissary put the sword case into the storage bag and looked up at the cave with a smile. If it weren't for Zhu Chenghe, this emissary wouldn't have thought that Li Shoubai and Reverend Brightsword's flying swords were hidden here. It's really unexpected. Indeed, even I didn't really believe Martial Nephew Zhu that day either. The tall and skinny cultivator nodded. "However, even if there's nothing, Martial Nephew Zhu has already done a great deed by being able to lure 2 sword cultivators here. Hehe, not to mention killing 2 birds with 1 stone. The emissary said with a smile. "I don't dare." Zhu Chenghe was very respectful at this time. Chen Yi also smiled apologetically and didn't dare to say more. "Well, this matter is over. I also passed on the Alliance leader's message. All of you have to be careful." The emissary instructed again. "Chen Yi's Burial Flower Manor is going to move again." "Yes, I'll follow the emissary's instructions." Chen Yi pursed her lips and smiled. "My Burial Flower Manor won't stay in one place for long." "Good." The emissary clapped his hands and said, "Let's go. We don't know who will come here next time. We also don't know if they will think that we cultivators killed 2 sword cultivators here." The tall and skinny nascent soul cultivator had a trace of a bitter smile on his face as he looked at the other nascent soul cultivator. 10 days later, on a foothill outside the ink-cloud Black Forest, the emissary watched Zhu Chenghe, Chen Yi, and the 2 nascent soul cultivators disappear. Only then did he turn around and fly in another direction. When there was no one around, he removed the MIMI. He saw an early Foundation establishment cultivator who was about 20 years old. He wore an ordinary Daoist robe and had delicate features and a scholarly face. It was the deputy sect leader Zhongzhi Hao, who was personally appointed by Heavenly Demon Sect's Zhongqing Xiao. Originally, I wanted you to kill the 2 sword cultivators. But you actually let one of them escape. This is good. The sect leader's plan is even more perfect and absolutely flawless. Isn't this the heaven's plan to let I do it? Zhongzhi Hao said to himself coldly. The sect leader's wisdom is unparalleled in this world. Dao sect, they are really stupid pigs. Soon after, Zhong Zhihao flew away in a grandiose manner. No one knew that such a soul-stirring thing had happened in the Ink Jiao Black Forest. No one knew that Xiao Hua had lost his life in the Ink Jiao Black Forest. As for Zhong Zhihao, although he was one of Zhong Qingxiao's doppelgangers, Zhong Qingxiao now specialized in Dao techniques. For the sake of Zhong Zhihao's safety and secrecy, she did not keep in touch with him at all times like before and turned Zhong Zhihao's knowledge into her own knowledge. How did Zhong Qingxiao know that Xiao Hua had died? Moreover, Zhu Chenghe did not mention the loss of Xie Zhiqian and Qiong Yefeng, the Golden Core cultivators. Zhong Zhihao did not ask at all, let alone Xiao Hua, the Foundation Establishment cultivator. Even Chen Yi would never mention it again. Unfortunately, the matter was far from what they knew. Sometimes, what they saw might not be the truth. When Xiao Hua's figure fell into the brilliance, that incomparable sword light chopped down from his back. In the eyes of Zhu Chenghe and the others, Xiao Hua was split into two halves. In the eyes of Zhu Chenghe and the others, perhaps because the sword light was too powerful and the sword edge was too sharp, there was no bloody light for a moment, nor was there the tragic sight of Xiao Hua's body being split into two halves. In fact, Xiao Hua's scream was really tragic. It was really from the horror in his heart. It was truly terrifying. It was even more horrifying than that day when his meridians were almost broken by the earth-type spiritual energy of heaven and earth. After all, this was a blow from a true nascent soul cultivator's flying sword. It was a blow that really killed Xiao Hua. But when Xiao Hua shouted and released his horror, he suddenly heard a catcher sound in his mind. The expected pain did not come. Instead, his vision blurred and his figure appeared in mid-air. Moreover, his figure rapidly fell down. Ouch, my butt. Xiao Hua roared and jumped up from the ground. He touched his butt and scolded, "Who is so uncultured to put some needles on such soft grass? Don't you know that this soft grass is used for something else?" Immediately, Xiao Hua quickly touched his body and even touched an extremely important place. He said to himself in bewilderment, "Damn it, this young master, is this not dead?" Then, Xiao Hua seemed to have thought of something. He quickly untied his daoist robe and took out the voodoo puppet that was tied with a purple ribbon from his neck. However, the voodoo puppet had already been split into two halves. The corners of the voodoo puppet's mouth drooped again. Good heavens, this voodoo puppet is actually real. It's actually this powerful. Xiao Hua opened his eyes wide and looked at the voodoo puppet that was split into two halves in disbelief. To be honest, when he was refining the voodoo puppet, he didn't really believe it. After all, this was witchcraft, not daoist techniques. Moreover, it could substitute death. What kind of almighty ability was this? What a pity, now that the voodoo puppet has been destroyed, I'm afraid it has already been used 3 times. Xiao Hua felt extremely regretful. He carefully put away the voodoo puppet and thought, witchcraft has such a heaven-defying effect, how can it be lost? Looks like this young master needs to properly search for it. These things that others don't know about are definitely useful in crucial moments of life and death. Today, if it wasn't for this voodoo puppet, this young master would have died here without anyone knowing. Sigh, what a pity for this young master's spiritual armor. Xiao Hua took off the spiritual armor and carefully put it into his storage bag. He then took out the spiritual armor that Gantian Mountain gave him and put it on. He shook his shoulders left and right and said with a frown, "This spiritual armor, why is it so uncomfortable? I keep feeling that it smells like Chen Diheng's body odor." Done Xiao Hua said and raised his hands in the air. He let out a long breath and said, "The feeling of being alive is really good." Xiao Hua said and lowered his head to look at the pile of bones on the grass. He sighed and said, "These bones probably all met the same fate as this young master." Unfortunately, different people have different endings. This young master's life is good. Following which, Xiao Hua looked around and was shocked. He saw that this was a place filled with lush greenery. A layer of spiritual grass covered the ground. In the distance, there were a few tall trees with twisted branches. The lush green leaves on the trees rustled in the wind. A gurgling sound like that of a zither could be heard from the stream, causing Xiao Hua's excited mood to calm down. Xiao Hua raised his head again. Above his head was a sky blue color. It wasn't much different from the sky that he usually saw. Furthermore, above the sky blue, there were traces of white. It was extremely similar to the white clouds. Sigh, such a calm and peaceful place. After experiencing life and death, only then do I know that this is the most beautiful. Xiao Hua sighed. Just as he was about to walk around and look around, he suddenly heard the sound of wading in the stream. He couldn't help but sweep out with his spiritual sense. As expected, in the stream, there was a little deer that looked like a lamb looking at him in fear. It seemed to be able to sense Xiao Hua's spiritual sense and frantically walked around the stream. After running a few feet, it hurriedly went ashore and hid in the dense forest behind the stream. My spiritual sense can be used. Xiao Hua suddenly understood. However, when he swept out with his spiritual sense again, in the dense forest behind the stream, apart from trees, there were only trees. The little deer was nowhere to be found. -8. Chapter 2021. Strange. Xiao Hua found it strange. He blinked his eyes and thought for a moment, but he still temporarily extinguished the thought of going forward to investigate. Anyone who had just been killed once would be more careful, knowing the principle of curiosity killing the cat. This young master should do some good deeds first. Xiao Hua looked around, walked to the side of the stream, and used the great wisdom heavy sword to dig a large hole. Then, he turned around and cleaned up the large pile of bones into the large hole. After he had filled up the hole, he said, "What a pity, not a single person's storage pouch was left behind. Could it be that there were also people who came here? They also had the same luck as this young master?" This sentence directly exposed Xiao Hua's nature, but it wasn't that he didn't gain anything. There was a plum blossom-like token among the bones. This token was very strange. Xiao Hua couldn't see what material it was made of, and his divine sense couldn't penetrate it. It was probably carried by some cultivator. Xiao Hua couldn't see any clues, and casually put it into his storage pouch. But suddenly, Xiao Hua quivered again, and an excited expression appeared on his face. Yes, needless to say, if the storage pouches of these bones were all here, then it meant that there was only one passage in this space, and that was the dead end that Xiao Hua came in. Without being killed by the flying sword, it was impossible to enter. But what if the storage pouches were all gone? That meant that there were living people who came in. Xiao Hua didn't believe that someone could come in alive under the flying sword and not take away the flying sword and sword pellet. This also meant that, other than the dead end above Xiao Hua's head, there were other ways to survive in this space. Someone came in and out of that way, and took away all the storage pouches. But, this young master fell from the 3rd floor, so this should be the 4th floor, right? Why is it somewhat different from the 4th floor that Daoist Master Lu Peng described? There doesn't seem to be any cold pond here. Xiao Hua scratched his head, somewhat bewildered. Forget it, let's not care about that for now. This young master should first find a way out. Xiao Hua released his divine sense. This divine sense was also restricted here, but fortunately, it could still be released for dozens of zhong, so it was better than nothing. However, even if this young master finds a way out, this young master can't go out now. Zhu Chenghe and the rest were 4 golden core cultivators. They were definitely not something that yours truly could deal with alone. Motherfucker, this bitch Chen Yi looks incomparably pure, but not only is she extremely stingy, her heart is also vicious. That bamboo marrow of the jade orchid bamboo. I'm afraid this bitch has long since had the intention to kill me. Could it be in the buried flowers manor? Or was it in Mojiao Black Forest? Forget it. I won't bother guessing anymore. I can't guess the thoughts of a female cultivator even if I guess. I might as well use my own means to see who's the real deal. Xiao Hua's eyes flashed with a hint of sternness. He hated people who schemed against him the most, especially cultivators with higher cultivation than him. No wonder someone wanted to poison Chen Yi's spirit grass. Damn it, it would be better if all the youth-retaining grass died out. Sun Qian. Although she's only known by name, she's definitely an interesting female cultivator. Xiao Hua became more and more angry. He suddenly felt grateful to Sun Qian, who he had never met before. He felt a kind of sympathy in his heart. If there's a chance, this young master will go to the Buried Flowers Manor and make a scene. After finishing his good deed, Xiao Hua released his divine sense again and carefully examined the spirit grass under his feet. Unfortunately, after looking for a long time, there was only a common spirit grass under his feet. It wasn't rare, but no matter how long this spirit grass grew, it was only half a foot long. It was most suitable for some decorations, so many cultivators casually planted it in their immortal's cave. However, Xiao Hua still had a heart that would rather miss it than let it go. He still transplanted a large piece of spirit grass into his space. Then, after seeing that there was nothing strange around him, he lifted his feet and walked to the side of the small stream. The stream could only submerge his feet. It wasn't very deep, but it was abnormally cold and very bone-chilling. Admittedly, this place didn't restrict divine sense, but Xiao Hua's Zhenyuan was still condensed and couldn't mobilize his magic power. Xiao Hua had to personally wade through the stream. However, when Xiao Hua sat beside the stream and took off his shoes and socks, he suddenly had a rare kind of joy. It seemed that a childlike feeling that he hadn't experienced for a long time spontaneously arose. It also seemed that he often did this kind of carefree and unrestrained thing many years ago. This kind of rare mood made Xiao Hua walk along the stream for a while until there was a kind of pain on his feet. Only then did he reluctantly go ashore. Cultivators, perhaps, have heaven-defying magical powers, but when using these magical powers, they throw away a lot of fun. I really don't know if it's right or wrong. Xiao Hua suddenly remembered that when he was in Tianmen Mountain, Huang Tianle told him to often use his feet to walk. At this time, he was quite emotional. Walking ashore, it was still a grassland, but there were many more trees. These trees were named after Xiao Hua's footsteps, so he naturally didn't hold back. He pulled out a few different kinds of trees and sent them into his space. Who told Xiao Hua to have so much strength? Even if he didn't have magic power, pulling out these thick trees from the ground was an extremely easy matter. The forest was more than 10 times larger than the grassland on the other side of the stream. However, when Xiao Hua walked to the end, he saw a rugged and hard stone wall. He still didn't see any deer. Even the open space near the stone wall that didn't have any trees planted was only covered with green grass. What's going on here? Xiao Hua turned his eyes. When he asked himself this question, he actually already had an answer in his heart. Immediately, he stretched out his left hand without hesitation and opened his transcendence vision, carefully sizing up this stone wall. When he finished looking at all the places on the stone wall, he unconsciously used his hand to scratch his chin thoughtfully. The stone wall wasn't similar to what Xiao Hua had seen before. Previously, when Xiao Hua saw it, he could directly see through the restriction, and even a hole appeared in his transcendence vision. However, this stone wall wasn't the hole he expected, but 9 different stars. Strange. Xiao Hua stared at these stars for a long time, but still couldn't figure out what they meant. Soon after, he had no choice but to wade through the stream and arrive at the grassland he was at before. He wanted to find a similar stone wall on the grassland. However, what was even more unexpected was that this side of the grassland was even more extreme. There wasn't even a stone wall, only a restriction that divine sense couldn't see through, blocking him. After walking along the restriction for a while, Xiao Hua gave up. He didn't know how big this space was, but he knew that there wasn't only shrinking Earth into an inch, there was also so close yet worlds apart. If there was such a magic at the edge of the restriction, he wouldn't be able to find the end even if he walked for 10,000 years. When Xiao Hua returned to the grassland, he once again sat at the place he had just landed. He propped up his chin and looked straight up, as if waiting for Xie Zhiqian or Qiong Yefeng to fall from above. -8. Chapter 2022. After a full meal, Xiao Hua finally stopped his illusion of waiting for the rabbit. He stretched and lay on the grass, crossing his arms behind his head and using his head as a pillow. He even closed his eyes, looking like he was taking a break. However, in just a moment, Xiao Hua thought of something and suddenly jumped up from the ground. He patted his forehead and took out a sword pill from his Buddha's heart. He looked at it again and again. Damn it, I knew it. Those 9 stars looked very familiar. It turns out that they look similar to my 9 sword pills. Xiao Hua happily ran to the stone wall and took out the other 8 sword pills, using his Dharma eyes to deal with them one by one. Sure enough, the 9 sword pills Xiao Hua got from the Thunderquake Palace matched the shape of the 9 stars. Since this young master's 9 sword pills match the 9 stars, then, what is Zhu Chengha's sword pill? Thinking, Xiao Hua also took out Zhu Chengha's sword pill and compared it slightly. It was actually extremely similar to one of Xiao Hua's sword pills. Strange. Xiao Hua scratched his head. Could it be that this is the authentic one? Of course, Zhu Chengha's sword pill was said to be obtained from the first floor here, and Xiao Hua's 9 sword pills were completely unrelated. Xiao Hua naturally didn't dare to be sure. Whether it's a mule or a horse, I have to take it out for a walk. Xiao Hua thought and spread out his hand. The sword pill was sent to the stone wall, near the star that was similar in size to the sword pill. As Xiao Hua expected, a strange thing happened. The star emitted a faint brilliance, and a light belt with the same outline as the star penetrated the stone wall and covered the sword pill. Naturally, this was what Xiao Hua saw with his Dharma eyes. He couldn't see it with his naked eyes or divine sense. Just as Xiao Hua was rejoicing, the brilliance circled around the sword pill and turned back. The entire star and even the stone wall didn't change at all. Hey! Could it be that this is a mule? Xiao Hua looked at the sword pellet and put it into his storage pouch. Soon after, he took out his own tattered sword pellet, and the same brilliance covered the sword pellet. What surprised Xiao Hua was that at the same time, a huge force was suddenly born from the star. Without waiting for him to wake up, his sword pellet merged with the stone wall, and even merged with the star. Great! Xiao Hua was shocked at first, then he was overjoyed. This meant that his 9 sword pellets were the real 9 stars transit, and Zhu Chengha's sword pellets were just fakes. Since Zhu Chengha's sword pill is a fake, then Xiao Hua suddenly remembered, the 8 sword pills above are all fake, then what about the flying swords inside the sword sheath? Wasn't it even more fake? But since it's fake, why is it so fierce? Xiao Hua was somewhat unable to understand, but then Xiao Hua laughed involuntarily. His grandmother, this young master doesn't care if the information above is real or fake. This young master was scared to death by that flying sword. Isn't this coming here to compensate this young master? I'm sure the 4 people on the upper level are holding 8 fake sword pellets and are so happy that they don't even know where they're going. Following Xiao Hua's small tail, Xiao Hua placed the other 7 sword pellets into the stars. But when Xiao Hua spat out Zhu Meng, he saw Zhu Meng nimbly shrink in Xiao Hua's palm. No matter what Xiao Hua did, he was unable to restore Zhu Meng to the appearance of a sword pellet. His grandmother Tilda, this young master didn't work hard for nothing, right? Xiao Hua was somewhat puzzled, but he still unwillingly sent Zhu Meng to the stone wall. Something that made Xiao Hua happy happened again. Under the brilliance, the small sword actually escaped from Xiao Hua's palm and drilled into the last star. Great! Xiao Hua didn't even have time to cheer when he heard a rumbling sound coming from the stone wall. It was as if the stone wall was about to be completely pushed open. The 9 stars in the stone wall emitted a bright brilliance and began to rapidly rotate. The rotation trajectory was very strange, and as it rotated, a fiery red brilliance gradually formed within the 9 stars. Hey! Xiao Hua opened his Dharma eyes wide. He wasn't looking at the fiery red brilliance, but the rotation trajectory of the 9 stars. He had practiced sword play the world for a long time and had some attainments in sword formations. At this moment, with just a few glances, he immediately understood that the rotation of the 9 stars was a profound sword formation technique. Xiao Hua looked while desperately memorizing. When all the 9 stars stopped, Xiao Hua finally finished looking at the entire sword formation. When Xiao Hua closed his Dharma eyes, he carefully recalled the sword formation's trajectory in his mind. Only when he was sure that he had completely memorized it did he want to open his eyes. However, before he could even open his eyes, something cold and wet licked his eyes. Red dawn. Xiao Hua's first reaction was fairy red dawn, but when he opened his eyes, In front of him was actually the small deer he saw just now. Ah! Xiao Hua looked at the small deer that was abnormally panicked and abnormally intimate. He smiled and used his hand to push the small deer's head to the side. But this deer was different from others. Xiao Hua didn't feel any warmth when he touched it, only a kind of coldness and a kind of sharpness. This small deer is probably the brilliance that appeared under the 9 stars illumination just now. Or maybe it came out from this cave. Xiao Hua was a little enlightened. He saw that a cave entrance that was about the height of a person had appeared in the 9 stars. It led to the stone wall, and within that cave, there was a faint brilliance that seeped out. Where's my sword pill? Where's my dream executioner? Xiao Hua hurriedly looked at the 9 stars. Unfortunately, the 9 stars were still located in the stone wall, and his divine sense and eyes couldn't see them. Xiao Hua slightly activated the sword art. Although he couldn't really use it, Xiao Hua could faintly sense that the dream executioner was currently in the cave. Should I go in or not? Xiao Hua was a little hesitant, but as if it knew Xiao Hua's hesitation, the small deer actually stretched out its head, bit his daoist robe, and pulled him in. Seeing such a clever small deer, Xiao Hua smiled. The timid small deer wasn't afraid of what was inside, so he didn't have to worry about anything. After approaching the cave, Xiao Hua immediately felt an extremely pure heaven-earth spiritual qi. It was far from being comparable to the cave he had just entered. However, when he turned a corner and came face to face with a space that was the same size as the upper level, Xiao Hua was dumbfounded. In that space, there was a large stone that was exactly the same as the upper level. At this time, there were also 8 sword pills and a sword case. However, the only difference on the stone was that the dream executioner was also placed there flat like an ordinary flying sword. Looking at the 2 sides of the stone, there were 2 cultivators sitting cross-legged with their eyes closed. One was dressed as a sword cultivator, the other was dressed as a daoist cultivator. What else was there to say? Xiao Hua was shocked and didn't dare to use his divine sense to scan. He hurriedly bowed and said, Junior Xiao Hua greets Senior Li Shoubai and Daoist Bright Sword. However, after waiting for a long time, he didn't hear anyone speak. Only then did Xiao Hua secretly scan the 2 with his divine sense. However, in his divine sense, how were they 2 people? They were simply 2 incomparably sharp swords that could directly cut through Xiao Hua's divine sense. Are these 2 people alive or dead? Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. He knew that cultivators were incomparably powerful and could cut off one's life force. It was common for cultivators to come back from the brink of death. However, based on the appearance of these 2 people, he couldn't be sure at all. However, Xiao Hua immediately thought of what Zhu Chenghe said. Li Shoubai and Daoist Bright Sword's Life Sword Tablet and Life Spirit Tablet were already damaged. How could the 2 of them still be alive? Seniors, I heard that the 2 of you have already immortalized. Junior had no choice but to intrude. Please forgive me. Xiao Hua bowed again. This is the sword pill that Junior obtained. Moreover, Junior has already refined it. Junior still wants to take back the execution dream. Oh, of course, Junior's ability is limited for the other 8 sword pills and can't refine them. If Senior wants to take them back, Junior has no objections. As he spoke, Xiao Hua waved his hand and wanted to take back the execution dream. However, the execution dream seemed to be extremely heavy and couldn't be picked up. Xiao Hua sighed and walked to the front of the rock. He looked at the sword sheath and then looked at Zhu Meng, pondering how to pick up Zhu Meng. At this moment, the obedient little deer leaped past Xiao Hua and jumped into the sword sheath with a light jump. Hey! This little deer! Xiao Hua was somewhat dumbfounded. He only knew a little about sword cultivators. All of his flying swords were trained in Sword Plays the World. He didn't know anything about the flying sword techniques of the Changbai sect. This little deer is the sword spirit of Daoist Bright Sword's flying sword. How can a cultivator's flying sword have a sword spirit? Is a sword spirit this mysterious? Xiao Hua raised his Dharma eye and looked at the sword case. Inside the sword case was a fiery red little deer lying down. It was extremely quiet and didn't seem to be dangerous. However, once bitten by a snake, twice shy. Xiao Hua had just been killed by the sword case. He couldn't make the same mistake again. After thinking for a long time, when his gaze fell on the cultivators sitting on both sides of the stone, he couldn't help but smile. Of course, if there was a problem with the sword case, he could escape. These two, wouldn't they also be affected? This physical body, wouldn't it be even more dangerous? Thinking this, Xiao Hua still chose a more ingenious angle. If there was a problem with the sword case, he could immediately hide behind Li Xiaobai. Xiao Hua was much more careful, but when he opened the sword case, there was no abnormality at all. He only saw an extremely ordinary flying sword lying quietly inside the sword case. That kind of silence was really like a shy little deer. Xiao Hua was shocked because this flying sword looked exactly like the one that killed him on the 3rd floor. How could there be two identical flying swords? Daoist Bright Sword had two flying swords. Xiao Hua gently took out the flying sword. On the cold sword hilt, there was a faint aura of the little deer. It was quite dependent on Xiao Hua. At this time, Xiao Hua felt that the dream executioner seemed to be able to move. Xiao Hua didn't hesitate. He raised his hand and the dream executioner answered. Xiao Hua didn't hesitate again and immediately sent the dream executioner into the Buddha's heart. -8. Chapter 2023. After receiving the Dream Slayer, Xiao Hua's heart calmed down. He used his index finger to touch the other sword orb. The sword orb rotated with his finger on the big rock, and the somewhat healed crack flashed left and right. Senior Li Xiaobai, Xiao Hua said shyly, this sword orb of yours, this little one has nurtured it for many years. Senior, take a look, it's almost repaired. If I leave the sword orb here, it can't be repaired completely. Senior, you don't want this little one to give up halfway, right? This little one feels that this sword orb should be left here with this little one, wait for this little one to properly repair it, and wait for it to shine in the future. Since you don't object, this little one will take it as your consent. Thus, Xiao Hua didn't see Li Xiaobai's objection and put the sword orb into his Buddha heart like lightning. Soon after, Xiao Hua scratched his head, touched his nose with his finger, and said, Senior, you seem to be an easy person to talk to, and you don't want your sword orb to be misused. How about this, since this little one has already received 2 sword orbs, you might as well give this little one the 9 stars transit of the sun it's still the same old rule. If you don't say anything, this little one will take it as your consent. Just like this, Xiao Hua took back the 8 sword orbs and put them into his Buddha heart. Soon after, Xiao Hua looked at the flying sword in his hand, somewhat embarrassed. This flying sword belonged to Reverend Brightsword, and it was also Changbai sect's. If he took it out, he was afraid that it would cause trouble. Moreover, he already had the 9 stars transit of the sun flying sword, so Reverend Brightsword's flying sword was probably useless. However, when Xiao Hua put the sword case on the rock, the little deer jumped out of the sword case and licked Xiao Hua's hand, as if it was begging Xiao Hua to take it away. Xiao Hua touched the little deer's ice-cold head and pondered. But at this moment, the little deer bit Xiao Hua's Daoist robe and led Xiao Hua to the other side of the big rock. Its small tongue licked a bulge on the big rock. The strange thing was, following the little deer's actions, the bulge actually slowly disappeared, revealing a small jade slip. It's really strange. Xiao Hua knew that this little deer should be the key to discovering this jade slip. If the little deer didn't want to, perhaps no one would be able to find this jade slip. Taking the jade slip from the little deer's mouth, Xiao Hua used his hand to touch the little deer's forehead, indicating that it should wait a moment, and then his divine sense of the jade slip. Xiao Hua's expression changed a few times. First, he suddenly understood, then he showed respect, then he was overjoyed. In the end, he was actually wild with joy. Of course, in the end, his brows were tightly knitted, as if he had encountered something difficult to decide. After completely reading the jade slip, Xiao Hua carefully put the jade slip into the space and patted the little deer's head, indicating that it should return to the flying sword. Soon after, Xiao Hua waved his hand and the flying sword returned to his hand. Only then did he straighten his clothes and salute Li Xiaobai and Daoist Master Brightsword again, saying, This junior has disturbed the two seniors. The two seniors' determination and confidence in pursuing the way of the sword, as well as their noble character and unquestionable integrity, this junior admires them. Today, this junior will take away the sword pellet and flying sword. In the future, no one will disturb the two seniors. Quiet cultivation. Soon after, Xiao Hua saluted the two 9 times, slowly sweeping his eyes over the entire space, and slowly retreated from the space. Following his retreat, the entire cave rumbled and gradually closed, gradually shrinking, and completely disappearing from the stone wall. Only when the cave completely disappeared did Xiao Hua put the flying sword into the space with a flick of his sleeve. Soon after, Xiao Hua didn't go far. He sat in front of the stone wall and carefully recalled what he had just seen. It turned out that what was recorded in the jade slip was the friendship between Li Shoubai and Daoist Master Brightsword, the two's determination to pursue the way of the sword, and the two's helplessness when they were forced to duel. Just as the legend said, Daoist Master Brightsword went to Huan country to challenge the sword cultivators. Although it was for the way of the sword and for his own realm, it was more for the prestige of the Changbai sect and for the benefit of his sect. In fact, according to Daoist Master Brightsword's thoughts, he could have quietly gone and found a few sword cultivators with similar cultivation to himself. Wouldn't it have been better if they discussed the sword in the morning and wine in the evening? Who would have thought that as soon as he left the Changbai sect, the eyes of the 3 cultivation countries were focused on him? The sword cultivators of Huan country also looked at him with vigilant and threatening gazes. They simply treated his so-called friendliness as a trap. When Daoist Master Brightsword saw that his goodwill was fruitless, he could only brandish his flying sword and fight head-on. Of course, Daoist Master Brightsword's attainments in the flying sword far exceeded the expectations of the sword cultivators of Huan country. It was normal for him to be easily defeated by Daoist Master Brightsword. That challenge could not be considered a success. First, Daoist Master Brightsword's state of mind was not there and the results were limited. Second, the sword cultivator he wanted to challenge, Li Shoubai, was not in the flame bamboo sword sect. When Daoist Master Brightsword returned to the Changbai sect and went into seclusion, Li Shoubai chased after him. Similar to Daoist Master Brightsword's situation, Li Shoubai also had a mission. His mission was even more important than Daoist Master Brightsword's. He had to redeem the reputation of the sword cultivators of Huan country. However, when he saw Daoist Master Brightsword's refined and courteous manner at the Changbai sect and talked with him in detail, Li Shoubai knew that although this cultivator in front of him was from the Dao sect, he was like him, a fanatic who pursued the way of the sword. However, this was the cultivation world, the Dawn Rain continent where the way of the sword and the way of the sword were on par. They could not work together to comprehend and improve together. Moreover, all the sword cultivators and the entire Dao sect were waiting for this rare flying sword duel. It was impossible for them to not give the Changbai sect, the Flame Bamboo Sword sect, and the entire Dawn Rain continent an explanation. The two fell into a difficult situation. Just as Daoist Master Brightsword said in the Jade Slip, I originally thought that if I cultivated a small divine ability, I would be free to roam the Dawn Rain continent. If I cultivated a great divine ability, I would be free to roam the 3 realms. However, the cultivation world is like the mortal world. There is face, honor, and many awkwardness that one has no choice but to do. Now, I understand that I am not wrong to be obsessed with the way of the sword, I am not wrong to pursue the way of the sword. I am wrong to be in the limelight, I am wrong to place the glory of the sect on myself. If I was given a chance, I would hide the sword in my heart and hide the blade. Before I could break free from the shackles of the sect, I would just be an ordinary free disciple. In the half a year at the Changbai sect, Daoist Master Brightsword and Li Shoubai completely let go of their misgivings and let go of the barrier between the Dao sect and the sword cultivators. They discussed the way of the sword together and discussed what they had learned. They even learned from each other's strengths to make up for their weaknesses. They had made great progress in many areas of the way of the sword. However, as the relationship between the two grew, the pressure they faced also increased. The Changbai sect master had already given the order to have a winner or loser no matter what. This caused the two of them to be in an extremely difficult position. -8. Chapter 2024. Of course, the two could also join hands to create a scam and deceive the world. However, both of them were experts in the way of the sword and would rather break than bend. They knew that if they did this, their way of the sword would be tarnished and their state of mind would also be tainted. In the future, their way of the sword would not have any progress. Rather than that, they might as well have a real duel. Thus, Reverend Brightsword and Li Shoubai made a promise to the world. However, after half a year of sparring, Reverend Brightsword and Li Shoubai were clear that the flying swords of sword cultivators and the flying swords of Daoist sects each had their own merits. In ordinary places, even if they could distinguish who was better, it would be due to the difference in magic power, magic tools, and even swords. It would not be able to distinguish who was better in the way of the sword. Only by discarding these factors could one truly determine who was better in the way of the sword. Thus, Reverend Brightsword chose a place like the Ink Jiao Black Forest that restricted spiritual sense and magic power. At the same time, the two of them also considered each other. They only agreed to allow the Changbai sect and Yangzhou sword sect to fight, but they would definitely not announce the result of the duel to the world. The result of the battle was basically within Daoist Master Brightsword's and Li Shoubai's expectations. The difference in cultivation between the two was too minuscule. It could only end in mutual destruction. And this mutual destruction attack was launched by both of them at the same time without any hesitation. They did not hold back in the slightest. They were truly dying for the Tao of the sword. This was also the reason why Xiao Hua bowed 9 times to the corpses of the two people in the end. Xiao Hua asked himself if he would sacrifice himself for something, but he admired these seniors who sacrificed themselves for their own pursuits from the bottom of his heart. After that sword, Li Shoubai died. However, because Reverend Brightsword had a Yuanying, he did not immediately die. First, he set up a deceptive formation in the cave on the 3rd floor to prevent covetous people from destroying their bodies. Then, he activated the formation he had set up in advance in the cave on the 4th floor and wrote down a jade slip before he died safely. In the jade slip, other than recording the real situation of Li Shoubai and Reverend Brightsword's interaction and duel, it also explained the deceptive array in the 3rd and 4th floor. Of the 2 flying swords of Reverend Brightsword on the 3rd and 4th floors, only the 3rd floor was real. Inside the flying sword was an array laid down by Reverend Brightsword. On the 4th floor, the flying sword that Xiao Hua had obtained was not used by Reverend Brightsword. However, the flying sword that Xiao Hua obtained was the true essence of Reverend Brightsword's flying sword. In other words, it was the sword intent of Reverend Brightsword's flying sword. The sword intent was different from the sword spirit. It was a realm of pure sword Tao, a height of comprehension of the sword Tao. This sword intent was sealed within this ordinary flying sword by Reverend Brightsword. Seeing this, Xiao Hua really did frown, because he thought that the little deer should be the sword spirit of the flying sword, but he didn't expect that the little deer was actually a sword intent that could kill everything. Look at Xiaolu's shy and timid appearance. How was it related to sword intent at all? Daoist Brightsword's treatment of Li Shoubai's 9 sword pellets was different. The 8 sword pellets placed in the 3rd level were fake, but the sword spirits inside were real. However, the sword spirits were damaged during the battle. The 9th sword pellet, which was the one that Xiao Hua obtained from Zhu Chenghe, was thrown out of the valley by Reverend Brightsword. As for the real 9 sword pellets and the sword intent within them, Reverend Brightsword hesitated for a long time because it involved the two's physical bodies and even the inheritance of the sword Tao. In the end, he still threw the sword pellets in the 4th level. He still wanted to pass down the sword Tao that he and Li Shoubai had comprehended. As for the sword Tao that Li Shoubai and Reverend Brightsword had comprehended, it was also explained in the jade slip. The real sword intent was their comprehension. If a fated person obtained the sword intent, they would be able to obtain their comprehension from the sword intent and receive their inheritance. Of course, the comprehension that couldn't be included in the sword intent was also recorded in the jade slip. This was also the content that made Xiao Hua wild with joy. This part talked about Reverend Brightsword's unique comprehension, as well as Li Shoubai's repair of this comprehension. This was the secret of using the primordial spirit to control the sword. Sword cultivators used the sword as their foundation and used their own body to nurture a sword spirit, achieving the goal of controlling the sword with their own body. This was known to all cultivators in the world. However, the sword spirit was the sword pellet spirit. It was a unique secret technique used by various sword sects to temper their sword pellets. Sword cultivators used their own blood and sweat to nurture the sword spirit, allowing the sword spirit to be used by them. After hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of years of communication, they could become one with the sword spirit, becoming one with the sword spirit. Reverend Brightsword blazed a new path and thought of using a wisp of his primordial spirit to fuse with a flying sword, using his primordial spirit to control the sword. It wasn't that no Dao sect cultivators had thought of this method since ancient times, but Reverend Brightsword had used his own unique method to realize it. He had even succeeded. He had used his primordial spirit to defeat the sword cultivator's sword spirit flying sword one by one. In the Jade Slip, Reverend Brightsword had recorded a secret technique to nurture and strengthen the primordial spirit. This was what Li Shoubai had comprehended. Li Shoubai had also relied on this secret technique to obtain the reputation of a sword immortal. This secret technique of sword heartseed that had been perfected by Reverend Brightsword and Li Shoubai was admittedly a secret path to cultivating the flying sword in the eyes of sword cultivators. However, in Xiao Hua's eyes, how could it merely be a path to cultivating the flying sword? He had the ghost cultivator's secret technique to divide his primordial spirit into tens of thousands, as well as the devil cultivator's blood shadow technique. The reason why he hadn't dared to split his primordial spirit was because he didn't have the secret technique to strengthen his primordial spirit. He was afraid that after splitting his primordial spirit, he wouldn't be able to distinguish between the primary and secondary primordial spirit, and his true primary primordial spirit would be devoured by the other primordial spirits. Now, Reverend Brightsword was actually able to split a wisp of his primordial spirit and fuse it with the flying sword. This secret technique was admittedly somewhat crude in Xiao Hua's eyes, and was even extremely dangerous. However, his method was correct, and his technique was absolutely heaven-defying. This method could be said to complement the ghost cultivator's spirit-splitting technique, and could be used as a reference. Li Shoubai's secret technique could also be used as a reference with the blood shadow technique's secret technique. Apart from strengthening the primordial spirit, it could also control the primordial spirit. This was exactly what Xiao Hua urgently needed to cultivate. How could Xiao Hua not be wild with joy? Xiao Hua sat cross-legged on the grass in front of the stone wall for a long time. After thinking about all the details, he sighed and said, "Two seniors. This junior has benefited greatly from your sword Dao and comprehension. This junior doesn't know how to repay you, but looking at the two seniors' intentions, they didn't intend to leave this thing for the Flame Bamboo Sword sect and the Changbai sect. Therefore, this junior won't give this thing to them. After this junior practices it, I will definitely choose someone with a noble character like the two seniors to teach, and pass down the two seniors' orthodoxy. This sword sect must be a new sword sect. It doesn't belong to sword cultivators, nor does it belong to the Dao sect's sword sect. Senior's sword heartseed will definitely make this sword sect famous throughout the world." Thinking of this, Xiao Hua suddenly quivered, as if he had thought of something. He looked at the empty stone wall with an inconceivable gaze. His gaze seemed to be able to see through the stone wall and into the stone cave, looking at the two sword-like bodies of Li Shoubai and Reverend Brightsword. Yes, a sword Dao expert who could split his primordial spirit and plant it into a flying sword, even if his cultivation was restricted, could he easily achieve heaven incarnation? However, Xiao Hua immediately withdrew his gaze and said with a smile, "This doesn't seem to have anything to do with this junior, right? As long as this junior takes advantage of it, won't he be stronger than anyone else? Forget it, this junior should quickly find a way out and return. I'm afraid that Haoming City's Xue is waiting anxiously, right? Since Reverend Brightsword has left the way out in the Jade Slip, this junior." Xiao Hua smiled and turned around to leave. However, after taking 2 steps, he was stunned again. Damn it, Senior Brightsword, how can you speak without bringing me along? Why did you only talk about the path from the third layer to the second layer, and the path from the second layer to the first layer? Why didn't you talk about the path from the fourth layer to the third layer? Xiao Hua was about to stomp his feet. However, when Xiao Hua took out the jade slip again and looked at it again and again, there was still no record. He was somewhat scratching his head. Since Reverend Brightsword didn't record it, then, there must be a reason. He couldn't have left a useless jade slip, right? Even if this junior successfully cultivates the flying sword, how will he go out? How will he let someone pass on this flying sword technique? Xiao Hua muttered to himself. Then, he looked around carefully. This stone wall can be climbed. This restriction can be broken. This stream water. Ayo, I'm such a big fool. Xiao Hua slapped his head and said self-deprecatingly, since there is water flowing in and out, it means that there is an entrance and an exit here. If water can enter and exit, then this junior can also enter and exit. Thinking about this, Xiao Hua was about to jump into the stream water and walk up, but at this moment, Xiao Hua smiled bitterly again. Damn it, this junior was really knocked out by Reverend Brightsword's flying sword. The cold pool that Reverend Lu Peng mentioned, isn't it where this stream flows into? If this junior follows the direction of the stream water, won't I be able to find the cold pool? Senior Brightsword, your sword strike was really too vicious. Your Dao can be considered as compensation for this junior. Xiao Hua really couldn't figure out why he didn't connect to the cold pool because of the stream water. If he really did connect like that, he feared that he wouldn't be able to obtain the true sword intent, right? Sure enough, following the flow of the stream, after Xiao Hua walked for the time it took to eat a meal, he found a gap that was only the size of a palm in one of the restrictions. This gap was clearly set up for the stream. No matter how Xiao Hua struck it with the Great Wisdom Sword, it would not expand in the slightest. Admittedly, Xiao Hua could try to use the spiritual fire, but did Xiao Hua need to spend so much effort? He only thought for a moment and put all of his storage pouches and other things into the space. He used a simple secret technique to pass through this floor that was extremely difficult for other cultivators. However, just as he passed through the hole in the restriction, a huge force pressed down on Xiao Hua's body from above. All of the true essence in his body completely condensed. It was a kind of condensation that Xiao Hua had never experienced before. Xiao Hua's entire body rushed out from the hole. Following that ice-cold stream, he fell from midair. Unfortunately, just as he had time to shout, he heard a plop sound as Xiao Hua fell into a deep pool. -8. Chapter 2025. There was a huge pressure in the space, and Xiao Hua couldn't use any of his magic power. He was like a mortal. When he fell into the deep pool, he struggled with all his might. Fortunately, Xiao Hua knew how to swim, and the buoyancy of the water was strong enough. Xiao Hua flopped and flopped to the shore of the deep pool. Xiao Hua powerlessly struggled out of the pool and let out a breath. He lay on the side of the deep pool, not wanting to move at all. The pressure in this space is too great, right? Xiao Hua looked up at the sky in admiration. It was pitch black above, as if he was at the bottom of the mountain in the ink-jiao black forest. Hey! Xiao Hua's gaze swept over the cliff he just fell on, and his eyes flashed with joy. He bent his waist and sat up. Xiao Hua used a lot of strength to do such a simple action. What Xiao Hua saw was an enormous, incomparably dark stone wall. The other two walls were the same. On the stone wall, there were dozens of holes of different sizes. Each hole had a different size of water flowing into the cold pond. Damn it, could it be that, behind each water flow is a space? Then, isn't each space the same as the one I just went to? Xiao Hua couldn't help but be flabbergasted. Xiao Hua stood up with difficulty and roughly sized up this space. He couldn't help but smile. It turned out that this was a rather large space. There was only one huge cold pool, and it almost occupied the entire space. Wasn't it exactly as Immortal Lu Peng described? So, this is the space that Immortal Lu Peng went to. Xiao Hua suddenly realized. It seems that the fourth layer is definitely not one space. It's multiple. Since immortal Lu Peng went in and out, Xiao Hua was relieved. There must be a way out here. However, Xiao Hua looked at the deep pool in front of him and the source of the stream behind it. He understood that it was easy to come out from the stream, but it would be extremely difficult to go back. Since there was no obvious way out of the deep pool, Xiao Hua turned his gaze to the slightly steep slope behind him. Contrary to Xiao Hua's expectations, the high slope was actually a rock wall. It was a sealed rock wall without a single crack. Even if Xiao Hua used his hands to touch every place he could reach, he still couldn't find any way out. Xiao Hua was a little anxious. He took out the Great Wisdom Heavy Sword and the Devil Hammer, and used brute force to knock on the rock wall. However, there was no effect. The rock wall seemed to be cast from copper and iron, and it was not damaged in the slightest. Xiao Hua frowned. There was nothing he could do, so he slowly walked towards the pool and released his divine sense. At this moment, although his divine sense was still able to leave his body, it could only extend for about 3 meters, which was not even comparable to the vision of the naked eye. Arriving at the left side of the deep pool, Xiao Hua stretched out his body and squinted his eyes as he looked down into the deep pool. However, he saw that in the dark shadows, behind a protruding rock wall, there was a palm-sized place. It really couldn't be sensed by divine sense. My goodness, who would care about such a remote place? How did Daoist Master Lu Peng notice that place back then? Could it be? Xiao Hua rubbed his chin as he looked at the deep pool. He was really imagining things. In the end, Xiao Hua ended his association with cultivators are also people and began to think about how to get this thing out. Then, he looked at the location of the cliff, blinked his eyes a few times, and very naturally opened his illusion breaker eyes. After using the illusion breaker eyes several times, Xiao Hua felt that it was really convenient to have this illusion breaker eyes. Ayo, this thing is really strange. What Xiao Hua saw with his illusion breaker eyes, the thing that couldn't be sensed by divine sense, was actually in the shape of a spindle. It was embedded in the rock wall, and it was more than 3 meters long and more than 1 kai wide. Xiao Hua understood that what the illusion breaker eyes saw was condensed from the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. It was even an extremely special thing between heaven and earth. Ordinary things couldn't be seen by the illusion breaker eyes. But, how do I get it? Xiao Hua closed his illusion breaker eyes, and his figure landed on the surface of the water. He scratched his chin in worry. Come, let this young master see your true appearance. Xiao Hua waved his hand and took out 2 huge magic hammers. With a splash, he jumped into the water and stood in front of that thing. Hey! This pool of water is actually neither hot nor cold. Xiao Hua had just come out from the cold stream and landed in the deep pool. He only thought about struggling to get out and didn't pay attention to it. Only now did he know that the water in this deep pool was actually exactly the same as ordinary water. Xiao Hua's gaze swept over the source of the dozens of streams. Naturally, he understood that these streams should come from the 3rd layer. Half of them should be in the cold ice area, and the other half should be in the lava area. At this place, they converged again. That thing was about 1 kai below the surface of the pool. Xiao Hua picked up the magic hammers, looked at the angle, and used all his strength to smash a protrusion on the rock wall. But as soon as the magic hammers fell into the water, the force was immediately offset by the pool water. Moreover, the pool water's buoyancy was quite strong. When the magic hammers hit the rock wall, it was no different from a light touch. Xiao Hua tried a few more times under the water, but none of them were satisfactory. He couldn't help but frown. He could only put the magic hammers into the space and cast his gaze towards the deep pool. Thinking for a moment, Xiao Hua's mind entered the space and activated the puppets. They dug a large hole in a certain place, and he himself looked at the thing in the rock wall. That thing looked no different from the rock wall. If Xiao Hua hadn't obtained Master Lu Peng's jade slip, he definitely wouldn't have thought that there would be such a thing here. Xiao Hua reached out and touched it. That thing was incomparably hard, and it felt as sharp as the rock wall. This is strange. I don't know what this thing is used for. Xiao Hua stared at it for a long time, thinking of other methods. At this time, He could only use his divine sense. His true essence was completely condensed, so what other methods could he use? He could only use brute force. Moreover, if there were other methods to solve this problem, he feared that when Master Lu Peng came last time, he would have already taken this thing away. When the puppets in the space finished digging the large hole, Xiao Hua's mind came out again. He placed his hand on the pool water, and his mind thought about taking the water in his hand into the space. Sure enough, a very interesting scene appeared. As the water in Xiao Hua's hand was taken into the space, the water in the deep pool also flowed into his hand, and this water was slowly taken into the space by Xiao Hua. At the beginning, Xiao Hua was still a bit unfamiliar with this, and it was a bit intermittent. But after half a cup of tea's time, Xiao Hua was already familiar with it. Just like a giant whale sucking in water, the water in the deep pool was completely absorbed into the space. -8. Chapter 2026. Ha ha ha, Xiao Hua laughed. His gaze fell on the bottom of the pool, but he saw that the bottom of the pool was still pitch-black rock walls. There were no obvious formations or restrictions, but the great power was still there. This is a natural forbidden area, the power of heaven and earth. Xiao Hua sighed. At this moment, there was a buzzing sound. It seemed that at the same time, the amount of water in the dozens of holes increased by more than 10 times. Xiao Hua didn't have time to dodge and was immediately drenched. Good, this pool of water is also strange. This young master should get back to work. Xiao Hua looked at the pool of water. He didn't care about the stream water on his head and took out the magic hammer again. Peng 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 in the entire space, Xiao Hua was like a foolish old man chiseling a mountain. He stood on the protruding rock and hammered the incomparably hard black rock wall. After smoking half a cigarette, Xiao Hua finally smashed a hole in the protrusion on the rock wall. Fortunately, although this rock wall is so hard, it can still be chiseled. If it was the rock wall just now, this young master would have no way to break it. Xiao Hua rejoiced a little. He had also collected materials for refining in the first layer of the cave, so it didn't seem to be this troublesome. Therefore, Xiao Hua was reluctant to throw away the rock, so he casually placed it in his space. A hole appeared. The thing that was flat with the rock wall just now, which he couldn't exert force on, now revealed a place where he could grab it with his hand. However, when Xiao Hua reached out to grab that thing actually shrank on its own, as if it was going to be flat with the hole that Xiao Hua made just now. Ah! Xiao Hua had already stretched out his hand and retracted it. Could it be that this thing is alive? One side of that thing slowly shrank, while the other side didn't move. In a moment, it was flat with the entire rock wall, without any gap. Xiao Hua looked at the other side of that thing. Sure enough, Xiao Hua didn't move the other side of the rock wall. That thing was also stuck on that side of the rock wall and didn't move. This. Xiao Hua seemed to think of something, but it was only a feeling, he didn't know what it was. However, he understood that it was definitely a good thing. Since it was a good thing, how could Xiao Hua let it go? Without saying anything, Xiao Hua raised his magic hammer and went all out. In the time it took to smoke a cigarette, under the hard work of God power Xiao Hua, he finally made another hole in the wall. This hole was about the same as the previous one, but it was clear that the effort he used was more than twice as much. At this time, Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. He put away the devil hammer and immediately stretched out his hand to grab the thing that was about to shrink. Ah! Why is it so slippery? Wasn't it hard just now? Xiao Hua felt a wave of slipperiness when he touched it. If it wasn't for the lack of heat, Xiao Hua would have suspected that he had grabbed onto something that he shouldn't have. However, he didn't dare to hesitate. He used his fingers to hold onto that thing tightly while his other hand pushed against the rock wall. He exerted all the strength in his body with one arm and shouted, "Come out for me." But contrary to Xiao Hua's expectations, just as his voice came out, the slippery thing in his hand suddenly disappeared, as if it had suddenly disappeared. At this time, his strength had just been exerted, and his body suddenly fell backward. Seeing that Xiao Hua had lost control of his strength, he hurriedly twisted his body and curled his body up. He quickly somersaulted a few times in the air, and with a poochy sound, he landed on the layer of water that had just gathered. Damn it, what is this? Xiao Hua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He raised his head to look at the thing on the high rock wall and was somewhat at a loss. He was currently at the bottom of the pool. The original wall of the pool beside him was a little concave, but it was really too small, no different from a steep mountain. Xiao Hua's hands and feet were clumsy, he couldn't even use ethereal steps, so how could he go up? Wait. Xiao Hua was helpless. He could only sit at the bottom of the pool and anxiously watch the water flowing out from the dozens of holes in the pool. He waited for the pool water to slowly float up to the big rock that Xiao Hua was standing on earlier. With the previous two experiences, Xiao Hua once again found a direction to smash. This time, he used the time of 2 cigarettes to smash down a piece of the rock wall. After collecting the rock wall, Xiao Hua immediately took out the Great Wisdom Sword. Gathering his strength, he used the tip of the sword, which had yet to be unsealed, to stab into that object. Haha. Sure enough, everything has its nemesis. Xiao Hua saw that the Great Wisdom Heavy Sword had indeed inserted into that thing and laughed heartily. He used his strength to pull the Great Wisdom Heavy Sword, and bit by bit, he pulled that thing out from the rock wall. Just how strong was Xiao Hua's arms right now? Perhaps no one in the entire cultivation world could compare to him. But even with this kind of astonishing strength, he was only able to drag that thing out of the rock wall with great difficulty, bit by bit. And Xiao Hua also slowly retreated to the shore as that thing was pulled out. Seeing that he was about to pull out the thing that was about 1 zhong long, Xiao Hua panted and his face revealed a happy expression. It was also at this moment that Xiao Hua suddenly became the same as before. His hands became light and he lost his balance. He had no choice but to spin a few times in the air to dissipate the force and land on the ground to stabilize his body. When he saw that the thing that was about 1 zhong long had disappeared, he was somewhat discouraged. He didn't look carefully and lowered his head to walk towards the pool water again. But when his gaze fell on the rock wall that was not covered by the pool water, he was stunned. That rock wall had become an empty hole, completely different from the one that was tightly sealed just now. Could it be that I pulled that thing out? Xiao Hua suddenly understood and immediately turned the Great Wisdom Heavy Sword to look. Sure enough, at the tip of the Great Wisdom Heavy Sword, there was a fist-sized thing inserted. That thing was the same color as the Great Wisdom Heavy Sword. If one didn't look carefully, how could they see it clearly? Xiao Hua looked at the thing in front of him and then looked at the rock wall. There was already an empty hole there. Xiao Hua even used his transcendence vision to look at it. It was also empty inside, there was nothing else. That thing that was about 1 zhong long and 1 kai wide, and it was a spindle, it became such a big piece. Xiao Hua was somewhat flabbergasted. He even evilly clenched his hand a few times and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What can this thing do? That's right, the thing in his hand was only so big, it actually didn't have any strength. It didn't have any weight at all. What can it do? Xiao Hua himself didn't know how to explain it. Forget it. It wasn't easy to get this thing, I must keep it well. Who knows what use it has? Xiao Hua waved his hand and put the Great Wisdom Heavy Sword and that thing into the space. After he was in the space, he used his mind to forcibly remove that thing from the Great Wisdom Heavy Sword. Only then did Xiao Hua mutter to himself, if it doesn't work, then I'll give it to Fairy Hongxia. Her lines seem to be a bit worse than Shueshue's. Oh, that's right, this rock wall is really solid. Now that there's a hole, it should be easy to break. Xiao Hua really didn't leave empty-handed. He ruthlessly smashed a few more pieces of the rock wall. Only then did he stop. He clapped his hands as if he hadn't had enough and returned to the shore. At this time, the water in the pool was rising very quickly. It had already reached the hole in the rock wall and was still rising. Hualala, the entire space was filled with the sound of water. The water in the pool overflowed the deep pool. The water in the pool overflowed the rock wall and continued to rise. This is bad. Seeing that the water in the pool had surpassed the original position of the pool and continued to rise to his feet, Xiao Hua was slightly startled. He knew that by taking away the water in the pool, he had triggered another restriction. He hastily looked left and right and moved towards the high slope that he had just found the way out. When Xiao Hua reached the high slope, he looked at the stream that was like a water dragon spitting out water. Xiao Hua came to a realization. Great, as long as the water in the pool rises to the same height as the stream, this young master will be able to swim over soon. And then go out from the place that I came in from? Just like that. Thus, Xiao Hua's eyes stared straight at the distant pool of water. He calmly waited for the pool of water to not reach the rock wall before he swam over. What Xiao Hua didn't expect was that when he was staring at the front with all his attention, the pool of water quietly didn't reach the high slope. When it reached a certain height, the rock wall behind Xiao Hua gradually emitted a faint brilliance. A 10 feet square hole appeared behind him. And in that hole stood a cultivator. Why isn't it rising anymore? Xiao Hua suddenly felt that something was wrong. A gust of cold wind suddenly appeared behind him. Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed. He used his divine sense to sweep behind him. Seeing the abnormality, he hastily threw himself to the left. At the same time, he took out the great wisdom sword in his hand and swept it behind him. With a pu sound, the great wisdom sword hit that cultivator's body. That cultivator's body was immediately sent flying. He crashed into the rock wall at the side of the cave and fell down. There wasn't the slightest sound of a scream. This person died long ago. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept again. He already knew. And at this time, the stream above the pool of water returned to its original state. The pool of water also began to slowly recede. Looking at the flickering brilliance of the cave entrance, Xiao Hua knew that the cave entrance was about to close again. Without thinking, he hurriedly took a big stride and jumped into the cave entrance. After a few breaths, the cave entrance disappeared. A pitch-black rock wall blocked the entrance of the cave. Oh, I understand now. Xiao Hua slightly nodded. There were probably some rules for entering and exiting this layer. As long as one grasped the rules, they would be able to enter and exit freely. Otherwise, Reverend Brightsword wouldn't have not written down the method of entering and exiting in the jade slip. This guy. I'm afraid he died here long ago. He didn't even have a storage bag on him. He must have been ambushed by the cultivators who came with him. Sigh, what can I do? Humans die for wealth and birds die for food. So what if he was a cultivator? Isn't it the same? Xiao Hua's divine sense swept over the cultivator's corpse. He slightly shook his head. Reaching out with his hand, he took out the tip of the devil's spear. Releasing his divine sense, he carefully took precautions and walked out of the cave. Xiao Hua knew that the exit method given by Reverend Brightsword might not be the same as the one Zhu Chenghe used to enter. He also wasn't afraid of running into them again. -8. Chapter 2027. The Haoming City was known as one of the 7 major cities of the country of Xi, and it was not an undeserved reputation. A mountain range that was several hundred feet high was towering under the clear sky. The mountain range stretched for more than 10 miles. There were many cultivators riding on clouds above the mountain range, going up and down from time to time. Among them, there were also immortal birds that spread their wings and circled around the mountain range. Some of them had people on their backs, while some didn't. If one looked carefully, they would see that there were some palaces, pavilions, and simple caves where the cultivators went in and out of the mountain range. They were quite different from ordinary immortal caves. If one were to observe carefully, they would be able to see that although there were many cultivators flying above the mountain range, the higher they flew, the fewer there were. At the bottom of the mountain range, there were the largest number of cultivators, and they had the widest range of activity. They were Qi condensation cultivators. The mountain range was covered with dark green vegetation. The vegetation was not the same, and each had its own unique characteristics. Every place had its own beauty. However, there was a faint light flickering under the vegetation, and there were even faint runes flowing. A single rune didn't look special, but if the runes on the entire mountain range were connected, the mountain range's aura would immediately be aggressive. Looking at the bottom of the mountain range, there was a strip of open space that was several miles wide, enclosing the entire mountain range. There were many buildings on the open space, and there were many secular people. These people were bustling with activity, and it was very lively. This was the entire Haoming city. The people on the ground were the secular people of Haoming city, and the cultivators on the mountain range were the cultivators of Haoming city. It really lives up to its reputation. At this moment, Xiao Hua flew over from mid-air and saw the majestic aura of Haoming city from afar. He couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Xiao Hua came out of the ink shadow black forest and didn't rest much. He found the nearest teleportation formation and went directly to Haoming city. However, when he reached the last teleportation formation, there was a problem. Because Haoming city was going to hold an auction in the next few days, and there were too many cultivators going to Haoming city, Daoist Master Quan Hong of Haoming city issued an order that the teleportation formation would only accept cultivators above the gold core stage. Foundation establishment cultivators and chi refining cultivators could only rely on themselves to fly over. Therefore, Xiao Hua had no choice but to ask for directions and fly over himself. However, this was also good. Xiao Hua had obtained Immortal Brightsword's Sword Heart Energy Seed technique in the Morzhao Black Forest, but he had never carefully comprehended it. Now that he was comprehending it while flying, by the time he saw Haoming city, he had already comprehended most of its essence. However, Xiao Hua valued this Sword Heart Origin Seed art. It was far from being used on a flying sword. Therefore, he had no choice but to be extremely cautious. He was afraid that there would be a problem if he took it out to comprehend. At the same time, he also took out the Ghost Cultivator's Spirit Splitting art, Li Shoubai's Primordial Spirit Strengthening art, and the Blood Shadow art. He scrutinized them one by one. Forget it. It seems like Haoming city is already near, but if I were to fly closer, wouldn't I still need a day's worth of effort if I were to use an ordinary flying technique? Xiao Hua released his divine sense like a waterfall. He looked to his left, found a hidden place, and landed. This place was already very close to Haoming city. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth was abundant, and the scenery was beautiful. It was 100 times better than the left side of the Morzhao Black Forest. Xiao Hua released the puppets and easily opened up a simple cave on a stone wall near the water. After that, he set up the rabbit array formation and sat down cross-legged. He opened his mouth and Zhu Meng flew out. When the Dream Execution sword landed in his hand, the sword light shrank and contracted slightly, appearing extremely agile. Xiao Hua smiled and muttered to himself, "This sword pill is actually Senior Li Shoubai's 9 stars transverse sun sword pill. There is also the sword intent sealed by Senior inside. This is something that sword cultivators yearn for. If I were to go around looking for sword cultivation techniques, wouldn't I be guarding a treasure mountain and begging for food? Moreover, with Immortal Brightsword's Sword Heart Energy Seed art, I can plant a trace of my primordial spirit in the other 8 sword pills and let them slowly germinate and grow. Presumably, it won't be long before I can use the 9 stars transverse sun sword art and even sword playing the world, right? However, Senior Brightsword has been immersed in sword Dao since he was a child. Although this secret technique of his is different, he still has a very deep background as a sword cultivator. It might not be difficult for a sword cultivator, but for me, it will be a bit of a challenge." Xiao Hua thought for a moment, then closed his eyes and read the Sword Heart Energy Seed art again. Then, he waved the flying sword and it floated in front of him. Xiao Hua's hands then formed an extremely strange seal, and he tapped the space between his eyebrows. The magic power in his body gradually surged toward the seal in his hands, and his divine sense also contracted. In less than the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, pain appeared on Xiao Hua's face, and bean-sized drops of sweat formed on his forehead. An unparalleled pain, a sharp pain that felt like it was tearing him apart, and a feeling that life was worse than death arose in Xiao Hua's head. There was a rumbling sound, and the space in Xiao Hua's mind shook like an earthquake. Little Silver and the other spirit beasts looked in horror at the starry sky that had suddenly changed. Little Yellow, Thunder Beast, and the others, who were sleeping soundly, also opened their eyes slightly and looked very sleepily. Quick! Xiao Hua uttered an incantation, and his hands trembled as he formed a seal. As the incantation entered his body, Xiao Hua felt his mind go blank and his head sway. It was as if the entire world had become two overlapping worlds. He knew in his heart that the initial primordial spirit split had been successful, and a wisp of primordial spirit had been torn from the complete primordial spirit. Resisting the extreme discomfort, Xiao Hua hurriedly used a secret technique to send that wisp of primordial spirit into Executioner Dream. Just as that wisp of primordial spirit entered Executioner Dream, a sword light as brilliant as a shooting star came from the distance and flew toward Xiao Hua's primordial spirit. That suffocating flowing light gave people a feeling that they couldn't escape, a feeling that made people want to be torn apart. Xiao Hua knew that this was Executioner Dream's sword intent, and didn't dare be careless. He urged his primordial spirit to fly toward the sword intent, like a moth flying into a flame. With a boom, Xiao Hua only felt his vision darken as that wisp of primordial spirit became entangled with the sword intent. Xiao Hua hurriedly continued to use the elemental planting technique to fuse his primordial spirit and the sword intent tightly together. Like a sweet rain, the sword intent slowly flowed within Xiao Hua's primordial spirit, gradually nourishing Xiao Hua's injured primordial spirit. After an unknown period of time, the primordial spirit within the sword intent seemed to have fallen asleep, and there was no more movement. Great! Xiao Hua sighed. He knew that the sword heart elemental planting technique was basically a success. He only needed to wait for that wisp of primordial spirit in the sword intent to gradually grow stronger under the sword cultivator's secret technique, and then he would be able to use his primordial spirit to control the sword. This method was indeed effective, but the pain was really too great. -8. Chapter 2028. Hehe, Immortal Ming Jian is really a genius. It's a pity that he can only use this method to drive a flying sword. He doesn't dare to split a trace of his primordial spirit. Xiao Hua endured the pain of his primordial spirit and secretly laughed. He doesn't know the ghost cultivator's soul-splitting technique. Every time he splits his primordial spirit, I'm afraid it's not just half of it. If he is like Senior Li Shoubai and splits his primordial spirit into 9, then wouldn't his primordial spirit be smaller? The other primordial spirits would easily devour their masters, right? I'm afraid this is also the reason why Senior Li Shoubai didn't dare to try. Subsequently, Xiao Hua closed his eyes and adjusted his breath, waiting for the pain in his primordial spirit to lessen slightly. With a wave of his hand, he took out the jade bottle containing the green python's venom. He used a secret technique and took out a drop of venom from the jade bottle. He used a secret technique to divide it into 9. Then, he calmed his heart and once again waved his hand, taking out the roots of the beauty-retaining grass from the space. Since the beauty-retaining grass, which was already dead in the eyes of Chen Yi and Chun Kuei, was thrown into the space by Xiao Hua, the beauty-retaining grass didn't have any movement at first. Xiao Hua even looked at it before entering the ink cloud black forest, and he basically didn't have any hope. However, after Xiao Hua was trapped by the black sand and desperately used a secret technique to temper his true essence and push his cultivation to the middle stage of foundation establishment, there were some changes in the space. Because of these changes, the beauty-retaining grass also changed. It seemed to have lost its vitality long ago, but it was slowly recovering. However, it was only recovering, and its vitality was still being strangled by the beast poison. However, in the space behind Xiao Hua's head, the beast poison seemed to have some restrictions. It was not as fierce as it was in the outside world. Therefore, when Xiao Hua entered the secret place of the ink cloud black forest, he didn't look at it. Xiao Hua only wanted the beauty-retaining grass to suppress the beast poison with its vitality, and then he would remove the beast poison himself. However, after coming out of the ink cloud black forest, Xiao Hua looked at the space several times. The vitality of the beauty-retaining grass was really weak, and it could only compete with the dormant beast poison. If he wanted to suppress the beast poison, it seemed impossible. Therefore, Xiao Hua simply took action today. If he succeeded, he would get a beauty-retaining grass, otherwise, he would give up. When Xiao Hua took out the roots of the beauty-retaining grass from the space, the beast poison immediately launched a counterattack as if it had awakened. The already slightly dim black threads suddenly swelled up. Go! Xiao Hua had long since made preparations. Without hesitation, he waved the spell he had already formed and a portion of the green python's venom flew into the beauty-retaining grass. Xiao Hua had already saved 4 stalks of beauty-retaining grass in the burial flower manner, so he was very familiar with this method of fighting poison with poison. However, this stalk of beauty-retaining grass had been poisoned too deeply. Xiao Hua had to use 2 drops of the green azure python's venom and use the time of a meal to clear out most of the beast poison. Ha ha ha. Xiao Hua saw the pitch-black color of the beauty-retaining grass gradually fade away, and his heart was overjoyed. This kind of rare spirit grass was the favorite of female cultivators. If he could find the pill formula for the beauty-retaining pill and cultivate a large amount of beauty-retaining grass, then, wouldn't he be able to easily obtain large amounts of spirit stones? Carefully putting the beauty-retaining grass back into the space, he drove the puppet to open up a medicine garden for the beauty-retaining grass in a separate place. Xiao Hua frowned, because in the burial flower manner, the beauty-retaining grass was made into a medicine garden using the best quality spirit stones. Presumably, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth poured into it was also extremely rich. Maybe there was some special cultivation method. Xiao Hua prepared to casually plant it, who knew whether it would work or not. It has to work even if it doesn't. Xiao Hua curled his lips. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth in this young master's space is abundant. Could it be that it still can't raise this insignificant beauty-retaining grass? Mother! Goldie's voice sounded, still extremely sleepy. What happened just now? The sky shook and the earth shook. Huh! Goldie, you woke up. You actually know that the sky shook and the earth shook? Xiao Hua said in pleasant surprise. No, Mother, I'm still sleepy. Boy slept a little longer. Goldie blinked and then narrowed his eyes again. Oh. Xiao Hua responded, then suddenly asked, You slept for so long, when did you wake up? Did you grow a little? Boy just fell asleep. Goldie was confused. The boy feels like he grew a little. Then there was no more sound. Little Silver. Xiao Hua didn't care whether Little Silver could hear him or not, and instructed, You absolutely can't touch this spirit grass. Little Silver straightened up in the medicine garden that he could eat at will, and very skillfully extended his 2 little paws, cupped them in front of his chest, and bowed up and down to indicate that he understood. Heh. This little guy is becoming more and more sensible. Xiao Hua smiled and looked elsewhere in the space. Although he had already taken out the spirit storage bag and could take Goldie, Little Silver, the Iceworm King Egg, the Water Butterfly and the others there, he also knew that this space was a little strange and would definitely be extremely beneficial for the growth of these spirit beasts. Therefore, he didn't touch anything other than putting the mighty strength centipede into the spirit storage bag. Of course, given Xiao Hua's current cultivation, the mighty strength centipede really didn't do anything, so he just left it there. Forget it, let this guy go back to the space too. Thinking this, Xiao Hua sent the mighty strength centipede back into the space. What about the water in the pool? Xiao Hua thought it would be fun for a moment, and moved some of the deep pool water in the hidden area of Ink Cloud Black Forest into his space. He didn't know what to do with it now. Millimeter, the water butterfly grows in the swamp. I'll put its eggs and the rainbow epiphyllum into the pool. As Xiao Hua thought about it, he took out a few stalks of Aeolian bamboo that had already recovered their emerald green color, as well as a dozen or so new stalks of Aeolian bamboo, and placed them beside the pool. Unfortunately, there were no Aeolian insects here, and the Aeolian bamboo was just bamboo. Afterwards, Xiao Hua took care of some things before withdrawing his primordial spirit from the space. Xiao Hua didn't drive the puppet to do these things, but only relied on his primordial spirit. The pain gradually disappeared, and the faint movements gradually became more and more skillful. Millimeter, the primordial spirit in the space is like a hand. At first, it can carry things, but now it can work. After it's proficient, it can think about how to control the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, and use the incantation in the space. In this way, it can set up restrictions in the space, and put all kinds of things in different categories. Xiao Hua somewhat understood, moreover, that nascent soul cultivator was able to turn the spiritual chi of heaven and earth into a big hand. It should be the same method. Thinking of the nascent soul cultivator, Xiao Hua thought of Chong Yefeng. Chong Yefeng's clear sky mirror sounds familiar, but it doesn't seem familiar. However, since it's related to this young master's origin, then I'll go to the rock border sect of the Lian country in the future. Alas, everything is meaningless. I'd better hurry up and improve my cultivation. Xiao Hua almost lost his life in the Black Forest, and his heart had long been confused by the realm and cultivation. He couldn't wait to immediately go into seclusion to cultivate, but thinking of Xue Xue, Xiao Hua's heart was sweet. I'd better accompany her back from the seaside. Moreover, refining the Ling Lei pill isn't something that can be done in a day. It's best to go to the seaside and find a place with elegant scenery to refine the pill in the morning and accompany the beauty at night. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua was suddenly shocked, and his face changed. Damn it, this young master is a little selfish. This young master's enemy is so powerful, I'm afraid it can compete with the Imperial Thunder Sect. This young master joined the Imperial Thunder Sect, and they didn't stop me. Maybe they don't care about the Imperial Thunder Sect at all. This young master and Fairy Hong Xia dual cultivated. After all, the situation at that time was forced, and this young master didn't know it. Now that this young master knows that he's in a dangerous situation, how can I drag Xue Xue into it? She should just peacefully and steadily be a disciple of Zun Lei Palace, and walk as far as she could on the path of cultivation, free and unfettered. It's better than being taken advantage of by this young master's enemy after dual cultivating with this young master. Wouldn't that be harming her life? But how can I explain it to Xue Xue? Xiao Hua's face was cloudy and uncertain, and he was really hesitant. Thinking of the changes Xue Xue had made for him, and thinking of the good Xue Xue, Xiao Hua really didn't know what to do. Forget it, this is all for later. First, I'll help Xue Xue build her foundation and send her back to the Imperial Thunder Sect. Xiao Hua sighed, let the Imperial Thunder Sect protect her first, and after this young master beheads my enemy, it won't be too late to dual cultivate with her. Soon after, Xiao Hua used the sky-stealing sun-swapping technique to conceal his cultivation level, and he still looked like an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator. Only then did he fly out from his hiding place and fly towards Haoming City. Xiao Hua had only been flying for half an hour, but he had already met many other cultivators along the way. However, their cultivations were all below the gold core stage, so Xiao Hua was too lazy to pay attention to them. Only when those aura-refining cultivators respectfully bowed to him did he show a slight smile. It seems that the auction in Haoming City is going to be very noisy. Many people want to find things that are useful for their cultivation here. Xiao Hua sighed with emotion. There were already many things in his space, but there weren't many that were useful for his cultivation. Like those cultivators, he also wanted to follow Hua Furong to the auction that nascent soul cultivators could participate in to see if there were any strange items that he needed. Rumble, rumble. The sound of a fireball exploding rang out less than a few miles in front of Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua scanned with his divine sense and couldn't help but frown slightly. A few miles away, there were 3 qi refining cultivators, all of whom were in the 11th layer of the qi refining realm. 2 of the qi refining cultivators were in a group and were confronting another cultivator. The lone cultivator was holding a stack of fireball talismans in his hand, and he was the one who threw the fireball. The other 2 cultivators were also holding yellow talismans in their hands. However, one of the cultivators wasn't wearing an ordinary daoist robe, but a kind of armor. The style of this armor was similar to that of Shang Qinghe, the guard of Haoming City that Xiao Hua had seen before. Needless to say, this cultivator was a guard of Haoming City. Xiao Hua didn't frown because of this. Instead, there were several foundation establishment cultivators in front of him, and one of them was even in the late stage of the foundation establishment realm. These people only scanned with their divine sense, and when they saw that there was a guard of Haoming City, they immediately withdrew their divine sense and continued flying forward as if they hadn't seen anything. -8. Chapter 2029. At this moment, the city guard of Haoming City clapped his hands and took out a rope-like magic tool. He muttered something in the air and was about to cast it. The cultivator on the other side was quick-witted. Seeing that something was wrong, he immediately threw out a pile of fireball talismans and flew toward the nearest middle-stage Foundation establishment cultivator. He shouted, "Senior, save me, Junior." Unfortunately, before he could finish speaking, the Foundation establishment cultivator flicked his sleeve and accelerated his flying speed, ignoring him completely. The cultivator was slightly stunned. However, seeing the two people chasing after him, he didn't dare to hesitate and flew toward Xiao Hua again. However, although he flew early, his cultivation level didn't seem to be as high as the two people behind him. Moreover, the city guard had already cast out his magic tool and caught up with the cultivator in the air like a fish. Before the cultivator could ask for help, his hands and feet were bound by the rope, and his whole body fell from the air. "Hehe, fellow Daoist Bai, why do you have to do this? We just got the news and made a deal with you in advance. We won't owe you any spirit stones, so why do you have to be so stiff?" the city guard said with a smile. "Chimph, I don't want to make a deal with you, so what?" The bound cultivator was still cursing while being held in the city guard's hand. "I want to exchange for Foundation establishment pills at the auction. What's the point of giving me those spirit stones?" Slap. The city guard slapped the cultivator's face and scolded, "Bai Fengliang, you're just a small individual cultivator. How can you be so ignorant? How can you cultivate to the 11th layer of the aura refining realm with such a rude temper? In my opinion, you should have been killed long ago." "Hehe, senior martial brother Liu, you don't know." Another cultivator said with a smile, "This guy is really stubborn. I heard that a disciple of a sect invited him to join, but he refused." "Huh? Is that so?" Senior martial brother Liu asked curiously, "Which sect is it? Why does this guy have such high standards? I only heard about it, so I'm not too sure." The cultivator was a little embarrassed. "It seems to be some heaven something sect, right?" "Huh? Heaven devil sect." Xiao Hua's eyes and ears were outstanding, so he had heard everything. He subconsciously swept his divine sense over. Hehe. Senior brother Liu's interest was piqued. He stretched out his hand and a yellow talisman hit Bai Fengliang's body. Bai Fengliang's body twisted rapidly as if he was in extreme pain. "Fellow Daoist Bai, I'm very curious. Can you tell me about it?" Senior martial brother Liu asked with a smile. It's nothing. However, since you're trying to intimidate me like this, how can I tell you?" Bai Fengliang said through gritted teeth. Blood had already seeped out of his teeth. "It's good that you know how to show off your strength." Senior brother Liu sneered, "I offered you a toast, but you refused to take it the hard way. Now, I won't give you a single spirit stone." As he spoke, he raised his hand and was about to pull out the small storage bag from Bai Fengliang's body. "Wait." Seeing this, Xiao Hua shouted in a low voice, urging his body to fly to the three people's side. The city guard of Haoming City was a little surprised. It wasn't that he didn't see Xiao Hua, but there were a few cultivators nearby who pretended not to see him, so he was a little bold. "Junior Liu Cheng greets Senior." That city guard was very respectful and well-mannered. He didn't reveal his identity, only mentioning his name. "Junior Li Minji greets Senior." Another cultivator also bowed and saluted. "Ian, get up." Xiao Hua waved his hand and said with a smile, "I've seen what you've been waiting for. It's just some things for cultivation." "Why do you have to be like this? What you've done today can certainly satisfy your own needs, but what about Bai Fengliang? What will he think? Do you think he'll let you go if he succeeds in his cultivation in the future?" Liu Cheng's voice was obviously not directed at Xiao Hua. He glanced at Bai Fengliang and said respectfully to Xiao Hua, "It's not that I don't want to give fellow Daoist Bai face, but since he obtained the Waiming Gold, fellow Daoist Li has been negotiating with him. He has always refused, saying that fellow Daoist Li gave too few spirit stones. That's why fellow Daoist Li came looking for me. We pooled together some spirit stones, added other spirit herbs, yellow talismans, and so on, but he still didn't agree. Don't you think he's making fun of me? Senior, don't listen to his nonsense. Bai Fengliang was very happy to see Xiao Hua standing up for him. He shouted, "The Waiming Gold is a material used to refine flying swords. It's extremely rare. I'm a loose cultivator, and it's not easy to obtain this material. Of course, I want to use it for something important. What do I need the spirit stones and spiritual herbs they mentioned? I just want to use this Waiming Gold to exchange for a foundation establishment pill. Fellow Daoist Bai, I don't want to criticize you. This Waiming Gold is indeed rare, but it's not worth a foundation establishment pill, right?" Li Minji couldn't help but refute, "If Senior Marshal Brother Liu and I didn't really need this Waiming Gold, who would look for you so many times? I'm willing. What can you do about it?" Bai Fengliang scolded again, "You want to curry favor with the newly appointed city guard captain of Haoming City, but what does that have to do with me?" Seeing that Bai Fengliang was so bad-tempered, Xiao Hua also frowned slightly and said coldly, "Bai Fengliang, since I'm here, you should speak honestly. If you continue to be so stubborn, I'll leave in a huff. Yes, I know I'm wrong." Bai Fengliang saw that Xiao Hua was angry and quickly shut up. Liu Cheng and Li Minji looked at each other with a worried expression. "Put him down." Xiao Hua grabbed with his hand, and the rope that bound Bai Fengliang was immediately shaken off. Bai Fengliang's figure shook a few times, and he activated the flight talisman to stand in midair. Liu Cheng was slightly shocked when he saw Xiao Hua easily shackle his magic tool. Xiao Hua said again, "Liu Cheng, as a city guard of Haoming City, you bullied an aura-refining disciple near Haoming City. It's quite damaging to Haoming City's reputation. I don't dare." Liu Cheng quickly bowed and said, "I can't go far from Haoming City, so I can only intercept Bai Fengliang here with fellow Daoist Li. Moreover, I don't dare to abuse my authority as a city guard of Haoming City, so I intercepted Bai Fengliang outside the city for this reason. The other foundation establishment seniors don't care. I'm afraid they don't care about us aura-refining disciples, right?" Seeing that Liu Cheng was so clever and didn't use too fierce methods when fighting just now, Xiao Hua felt that what he said should be right. He couldn't help but sigh at the way the foundation establishment cultivators before him sought advantages and avoided disadvantages. This old man doesn't care about your previous dispute. However, this old man has a matter to discuss with Bai Fengliang, so I have no choice but to extend my hand." As Xiao Hua spoke, he turned his head and said to Bai Fengliang, "If you agree to this old man's matter, this old man will have Liu Cheng and the other person release you. You should know that they won't give you any chance." -8. Chapter 2030. Bai Fengliang's expression changed slightly. He thought for a moment and shook his head. "Senior, please explain the matter clearly first. Otherwise, I won't agree." Then, he looked at Liu Cheng and the others. "If they can kill me, I'll just suffer for a while. But if they can't kill me, I'll definitely kill them in the future. This is much better than Senior torturing Junior for the rest of his life. Ha ha ha." Xiao Hua patted his own forehead. He was really laughing for this somewhat stubborn cultivator. "Take out your Waiming Gold." Xiao Hua laughed and said. "This." Bai Fengliang hesitated. "So troublesome." Xiao Hua waved his hand and used the great confinement technique. How could Bai Fengliang resist? He watched as Xiao Hua took the storage pouch from his waist. "Well, there are a lot of things. Unfortunately, only this Waiming stone is worth some spirit stones," Xiao Hua said with a smile as he opened the storage pouch and scanned it with his divine sense. Bai Fengliang was terrified when he saw Xiao Hua imprisoning him so casually that he couldn't even speak. However, his eyes were burning with anger. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't speak, he would have started cursing. "Well, Liu Cheng, take out the things you want to exchange for the Waiming stone." Xiao Hua looked at Liu Cheng again. Liu Cheng naturally knew what Xiao Hua wanted to do. He didn't even look at Li Minji. He reached out his hand and handed the storage pouch to Xiao Hua. He smiled apologetically and said, "Senior, thank you for your help. This is what I want to exchange with this guy. Senior, you'll know what I said is displeasing." "Good. Of course, Xiao Hua had looked at it very carefully. He nodded and said, "Although you are a guard of Haoming City, you have never bullied others. What you did today is indeed inappropriate, but I won't make things difficult for you. Thank you, Senior. If Senior needs anything in Haoming City, please let me know." Liu Cheng bowed and said. Xiao Hua didn't pay any attention to him. He took everything from the storage pouch and handed the Waiming stone to Liu Cheng, saying, "Okay, you can wait." Yes. Liu Cheng took the Waiming stone with a happy expression on his face. Together with Li Minji, he saluted Xiao Hua and urged the flying talisman to fly in the direction of Haoming City. After Liu Cheng and Li Minji flew far away, Xiao Hua looked at Bai Fengliang, whose eyes were about to spit fire. He waved his hand, took out a foundation establishment pill, and said, "Look carefully, this is a foundation establishment pill." Finished speaking, he placed the foundation establishment pill into Bai Fengliang's storage pouch. With a wave of his hand, he removed the restriction on Bai Fengliang's body and threw the storage pouch into his bosom. This. Bai Fengliang's face was naturally filled with joy, but he was somewhat puzzled. "Senior, you are..." Xiao Hua looked him up and down and said, "What do you think of this ending?" Bai Fengliang scratched his head and smiled apologetically. "Of course it's the best of both worlds. However, Senior used the foundation establishment pills to exchange for those spiritual grasses and spirit stones. I'm afraid it's a loss. However, what if your life is included?" Xiao Hua said with a smile that was not a smile. That was all because Liu Cheng used his power to bully others. Bai Fengliang said somewhat angrily, "If he hadn't intercepted this junior with Li Minji again, those who are too strong break easily, those who are too soft are undefeated. Bai Fengliang, presumably you also understand this principle," Xiao Hua said patiently. Seeing Xiao Hua being so amiable and approachable, Bai Fengliang couldn't help but sigh. This junior naturally understands. However, this junior's temper is like this. If others were to be soft, it would be easy to negotiate. However, if they insist on being tough, this junior would rather die than submit. Naturally, this junior. Alas, no matter what, this junior has to thank Senior today. Not only do I have to thank Senior for saving this junior's life, I also have to thank Senior for giving up this junior's heart to help this junior. Today, a foundation establishment pill was able to save your life. If you don't change this temper of yours, next time, there won't be a foundation establishment pill that can save you. Xiao Hua flicked his sleeve to let him stand up. Bai Fengliang nodded silently and said again, "Didn't Senior say you had something to do just now? Senior, please instruct me. If it's within this junior's power, this junior will definitely not shirk." "Oh, you don't have to be so concerned," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "Just now, I only used it to give a reason, don't take it seriously." Bai Fengliang was even more surprised and looked at Xiao Hua very strangely. He, all right." Xiao Hua looked all around and said, "Come with this old man." After waiting for the two of them to find a secluded place, Xiao Hua set up a silent barrier and asked very calmly, "Just now, Li Minji said that a disciple of some sect specially came to look for you and invited you to join that sect." This old man is a bit puzzled. "You're a loose cultivator and you don't have any cultivation methods or medicinal pills. Why, aren't you tempted by that sect? Could it be that that sect is too small?" "Oh, this matter." Bai Fengliang suddenly understood and said with a smile, "Senior is talking about the Heavenly Demon sect. It's a sect that has just risen in the last 10 years. "Oh, this old man really hasn't heard of it. I'm afraid it's an extremely small sect, right? Where is their sect?" Xiao Hua nodded slightly and asked again. Bai Fengliang shook his head. "Senior, please no. This junior also doesn't know where the Heavenly Demon sect is located. Their disciples are very mysterious." Last time, the disciple who wanted to invite this junior to join the Heavenly Demon sect was a loose cultivator that this junior had met a few times before. In fact, to be honest with Senior, it's not that this junior didn't want to join the Heavenly Demon sect, but that loose cultivator was really bullying. He wanted this junior to hand over rare spiritual herbs or precious refining materials before he was willing to introduce this junior to his master. You also know this junior's temper. A few words were inappropriate and this junior had a falling out with him. Now that I think about it, hey, this junior also has some regrets. It's all because this junior's temper isn't good. Oh, do you know anything about the Heavenly Demon Sect? Xiao Hua asked with interest. According to that fellow Daoist, their sect master's cultivation is very high and the cultivation methods he grasps are also very many. Just by relying on different cultivation methods, they are divided into several branches. Bai Fengliang thought for a moment and said, moreover, the Heavenly Demon Sect's way of recruiting disciples is different from other cultivation sects. They don't need too complicated of a selection. Knowing that you have some qi refining cultivation, they can accept you into the sect. In particular, as long as you cultivate to a certain realm, they will definitely give you the corresponding medicinal pills and spirit stones. Senior, think about it, this kind of good thing for loose cultivators like us is really like spiritual herbs falling from the sky. Oh, right, I don't know if Senior knows that the former Heavenly Forsaken was an organization set up by us loose cultivators. I've heard of it. Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. What? Is Heavenly Forsaken still there? Wasn't it disbanded long ago? No. Bai Fengliang shook his head and said, this Heavenly Forsaken has never been disbanded. According to that fellow Daoist, the founder of Heavenly Forsaken and the sect master of the Heavenly Demon Sect reached some kind of agreement. The loose cultivators of Heavenly Forsaken can join the Heavenly Demon Sect at will, and all the cultivation methods of the Heavenly Demon Sect are open to the loose cultivators of Heavenly Forsaken. Ah! Xiao Hua was stunned. He hadn't been a loose cultivator for many years. He originally thought that this Heavenly Forsaken was disbanded because of Qing Fengmin's death, but he didn't expect that it would be accepted by the Heavenly Demon Sect. Ayo, Xiao Hua was suddenly shocked again, and secretly said, the loose cultivators of Heavenly Forsaken are all over the country of Xi, and even the country of Meng and the country of Lian. The Heavenly Demon Sect has swallowed up Heavenly Forsaken, the power of the Heavenly Demon Sect. Isn't it stronger than the ordinary cultivation sects? But then he shook his head again. The sect master of the Heavenly Demon Sect is only at the early stage of foundation establishment. He is outstanding in Heavenly Forsaken, but compared to the cultivation sects, he can't even compare to a little finger. Even my Imperial Thunder Sect's shocking Thunder Palace can completely annihilate a Heavenly Demon Sect. But that's not right. Soon after, Xiao Hua was somewhat puzzled. The demon that we saw earlier was already at the early stage of the foundation establishment realm. Those two strong men were also at the early stage of the foundation establishment realm. They weren't much worse than the demon sect master of the Heavenly Demon Sect from several years ago, right? Could it be, they have a new sect master? Although Bai Fengliang's temper isn't good, he's not a fool. Seeing Xiao Hua specifically ask about the Heavenly Demon Sect, and with an extremely interested appearance, he couldn't help but secretly ponder. He whispered, I wonder if Senior has any grudges with the Heavenly Demon Sect. This old man doesn't have any grudges with the Heavenly Demon Sect. Xiao Hua raised his head and said, I'm just very curious about this Heavenly Demon Sect. Oh right, you still want to enter the Heavenly Demon Sect, right? Although Junior has obtained a foundation establishment pill from Senior, Junior still doesn't have any confidence in foundation establishment. Bai Fengliang slightly nodded and said, fellow Daoist of the Heavenly Demon Sect has already said that cultivators at the 11th and 12th level of Qi refinement like Junior are the most popular in the Heavenly Demon Sect. As long as I enter the Heavenly Demon Sect, I'll definitely have the corresponding Senior's special guidance, as well as the corresponding pills and secret techniques provided to ensure that I can build my foundation. That fellow Daoist covets Junior's pills, that's why he threatened me. Good. Xiao Hua clapped and said, since that's the case, in this old man's opinion, why don't you enter the Heavenly Demon Sect? While you're at it, help this old man inquire about the Heavenly Demon Sect. Bai Fengliang's gaze flickered as he looked at Xiao Hua and said with an apologetic smile, since Junior has entered the Heavenly Demon Sect, then Junior will consider the Heavenly Demon Sect as my sect. Senior, there are some things that Junior may not be able to do. Don't worry. Xiao Hua said with a smile, this old man won't make you make any heart oaths, nor do I need you to make any promises. I definitely won't give you any threats. This old man only wants to have a chance to meet you in the future. As long as you don't violate the Heavenly Demon Sect's rules and you're willing to talk to this old man about the Heavenly Demon Sect situation in detail, that's all. But Bai Fengliang bitterly smiled again. The Heavenly Demon Sect isn't a sect that Junior can enter as he pleases. Hehe, this old man knows. Xiao Hua thought for a moment, then with a wave of his hand, he took out some spiritual herbs and handed them to Bai Fengliang, saying, "That cultivator of yours from the Heavenly Demon Sect will probably recommend these things to you." Good. Bai Fengliang saw the spiritual herbs and raised his eyebrows. He was slightly happy in his heart and reached out to receive them. There's also these. Xiao Hua took out some pills for qi refinement. -8. Chapter 2031. Xiao Hua took out some medicinal pills for qi refinement, including several foundation building pills, and handed them to Bai Fengliang. These are for you. With these medicinal pills, I'm sure you can cultivate to the 12th layer of the qi refinement realm. As for whether you can build your foundation, that's not something I can give you. Soon after, he thought of something and took out even more spiritual plants. There are also these spiritual plants. Take them too. If you have the chance, exchange them for some spirit stones and things you need. Senior. Bai Fengliang was surprised and happy, but he still hesitated. Junior still doesn't know Senior's name. Moreover, Senior doesn't ask for much from Junior. Junior doesn't dare to believe it. Haha. Xiao Hua stuffed the things into his hands and laughed. You don't need to know my name. As long as you have the chance in the future, you can answer my questions. However, don't worry, I won't force you. I'll only ask if you're willing. Saying this, Xiao Hua waved his hand and tore down the silencing barrier. He turned around and was about to fly away. Senior. Bai Fengliang suddenly shouted, "What if Junior doesn't enter the Heavenly Demon Sect?" Up to you. Xiao Hua didn't look back. Then, I congratulate you for having the confidence to cultivate to the foundation building realm. After Xiao Hua finished speaking, his figure gradually disappeared. Bai Fengliang looked at Xiao Hua's back with a complicated expression. It was unknown what he was thinking. Don't enter the Heavenly Demon Sect. I don't believe it. Xiao Hua had already flown away. He wasn't worried that Bai Fengliang wouldn't enter the Heavenly Demon Sect. Without the guidance of a foundation-building cultivator, how can an ordinary qi refinement realm disciple cultivate to the foundation-building realm? My Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples have to go through a lot of trouble to reach the foundation-building realm. You, a loose cultivator, can easily reach the foundation-building realm. Besides, even if you don't enter the Heavenly Demon Sect, I'll just lose some spiritual plants. It's nothing. Hehe, Heavenly Demon Sect. I really want to see what kind of sect you are. Xiao Hua secretly schemed against the Heavenly Demon Sect and Zhong Qingxiao. And Zhong Qingxiao? At this time, in a bustling town, a handsome young man in a brocade robe was sitting in a tea house. He was looking at the people coming and going on the street with interest as he tasted the fragrant tea in front of him that was emitting a mist. Who else could it be but Zhong Qingxiao? Qingxiao, why are you sitting here in a daze? A series of light footsteps sounded from the stairs, followed by a concerned and soft voice. What's there to see here? You should be spending your precious time on cultivation. Otherwise, when would you be able to cultivate to the nascent soul stage? When will you be able to take your revenge? The corners of Zhong Qingxiao's mouth curled into a smile as an incomparable allure flashed from her eyes. Below the tea house, a group of women who were originally walking peacefully suddenly seemed to have sensed something. Many of them abruptly raised their heads in an attempt to capture the source of this allure. Unfortunately, what they saw was only a lonely back. The face that could bewitch all living things had already turned towards the female cultivator who had appeared from the stairs. "Yu Tong, you're here?" Zhong Qingxiao stood up with a smile and walked to the stairs. She stretched out her hand and said, "Come and try the fragrant tea of this tea house. It's really beyond my expectations." There's actually a fragrant tea in the mortal world that can compare with spirit tea. Furthermore, this fragrant tea actually has a kind of astringency that spirit tea doesn't have. The female cultivator who had walked up to the tea house was actually the sword cultivator who had been missing for a long time, Zhong Yutong. Seeing Zhong Qingxiao's outstretched hand, Zhong Yutong didn't seem to be shy at all. She stretched out her own hand and looked around with a smile. You really know how to enjoy life. You actually chased away all the customers in the tea house and enjoyed it alone. Hee hee, how can those mortals compare to you? Such a beautiful scene should be accompanied by a beautiful woman. We definitely can't let filthy things spoil our fun. Zhong Yutong enjoyed these words very much and pursed her lips into a smile. I can't win against you in an argument. I might as well not say it. If you're having a hard time cultivating, it's fine to take a break for a while. Come, Yutong, sit here. Zhong Qingxiao pulled Zhong Yutong's hand and had her sit next to her. She personally poured a cup of tea and gave it to Zhong Yutong. She then pointed at the street below the tea house and said, "Drink this tea first and look at the people below. Tell me what you see." Zhong Yutong seemed to be obedient to Zhong Qingxiao. She looked at Zhong Qingxiao affectionately and obediently drank a mouthful. Then she closed her eyes slightly as if tasting the bitterness in the tea. She then opened her eyes again and stared at the people on the street. After a long time, Zhong Yutong was puzzled. She turned back and said, "Qingxiao, what's there to see? They're just a bunch of mortals. They're like ants in the eyes of us cultivators. In the eyes of your heavenly demon sect, they're even worse than pigs and dogs." "Haha, Yutong, you're wrong." Zhong Qingxiao waved her hand and said mysteriously, "Although they're mortals, what kind of people are the most common in the entire Dawn Rain continent? It's them. We cultivators also come from them. Just look at their faces and you'll know what they're feeling and what they've been through. Cultivators like us need to cultivate and experience. But where do we get our state of mind and Tao attainment? Generally speaking, one has to come out from the sharpening of one's mind. Generally speaking, one has to throw oneself into this tainted mortal world. Only then can one stand out and emerge clean. Wonderful. Qingxiao, I didn't quite understand before. In the Tao sect, we cultivate the 1,000 layers of mortal qi. In the sword cultivation, we cut through the worries of the mortal world. Now that you've said it, I've been enlightened. Zhong Yutong was shocked and said happily, "No wonder your cultivation improved so quickly. Your talent is really something I can't compare to." Not at all. There was not the slightest complacency on Zhong Qingxiao's face. She only smiled and said, "I just happened to see such a laborious mortal in the world. Thinking about their lives and then thinking about our cultivation, I was slightly touched. As for the speed of my cultivation, isn't it all because you let me practice with your own understanding and some of your books? That's why I've gained so much." Zhong Yutong blushed. She obviously liked Zhong Qingxiao's words. She replied, "Aren't I repaying you? If you didn't take the risk and fight with your heavenly demon sect master for the task of looking after me, and even used your life as a guarantee, I wouldn't be so free. Would I be able to continue cultivating by your side? Even if you came out this time, you could still bring me out. I wouldn't have to be trapped in a secluded place. What's more, those books of mine are nothing. With your beauty, you'll be the best in any sect. Furthermore, for the sake of your master, your senior martial brother, and for the sake of taking revenge for you, I am willing to tell you everything I know." -8. Chapter 2032. Thank you, Yutong. With your help, I believe that I will be able to kill those nascent soul cultivators. I will let my master and senior brother smile in the underworld. Zhong Qingxiao held Zhong Yutong's hand and said sincerely. Zhong Yutong didn't pull her hand away. She looked at the people below the tea house and sighed. These ordinary people don't have a trace of magic power or cultivation, and they don't have a long lifespan. But they have no grudges, no vendetta, and no separation of father and daughter. We see them as sad, but they feel that they are very happy. If we look at it from this level, we can't compare to them. Back then, You enjoyed the kinship of your sect. Now, you are willing to risk everything to take revenge for that kinship. What about me? Now, I know how precious kinship is. Yutong. Zhong Qingxiao held Zhong Yutong's hand and smiled. Don't be anxious. Sect Master probably has some arrangements. Since he doesn't want your life like before, you can live. Since you've survived, you'll still be able to see your teacher and your sister. It's only a matter of time. I think you should cultivate well and master the great yin-yang six directions sword spirit. If you see Zhong Yuhe in the future, you should give her a big surprise. Okay. Zhong Yutong smiled with satisfaction and said softly, previously, I was obsessed with the way of the sword and only believed that the sword could sever the threads of love. But after meeting you, I know why I came to the three kingdoms. It's not for the way of the sword or the sword spirit, it's just to be able to meet you. Now, to be honest, I don't hate your sect master. If it wasn't for him, how could I know you? I think so too. To be able to meet you is a gift from the heavens. Zhong Qingxiao nodded and agreed. Then she said, my sect master is also a person with a hard life. He seems to have a lot of things that he can't help but do. By the way, Qingxiao, is there any news about Yuhe? Is there any news about the sword cultivators of the Huan Kingdom? Zhong Yutong asked again. I haven't been back for so many years. The Huan sword sect can't have no news. Oh, Qingxiao, don't say anything if it's difficult. I'm just worried about my sister. Zhong Qingxiao thought for a moment and stared at Zhong Yutong. Actually, I didn't want to tell you because I was afraid it would affect your cultivation. Ah, what's wrong? Zhong Yutong was nervous. Zhong Yuhe did not return to the Huan sword sect, and the Huan sword sect also sent two sword cultivators. One is called Duan Yuming, and the other is called Wang Shuyao. They came to Meng country to look for the two of you. Zhong Yutong smiled bitterly. Your heavenly demon sect is really powerful. I didn't even know that I was still in Meng Kingdom all these years, so how could they find me? Moreover, where did Yuhe go? Did your heavenly demon sect? When Zhong Qingxiao heard this, she hurriedly waved her hand and said, Yutong, don't worry about this. I've already asked the sect master. He absolutely didn't send anyone to capture Zhong Yuhe. Besides, the sect master's intention was to incite a conflict between the Dao sect and the sword cultivators. How could he possibly place all the blame on the heavenly demon sect? Your sect master is a little delusional. Zhong Yutong said bluntly. How could the conflict between the sword cultivators and the Dao sect be so easily incited? A few years ago, I told you about the sword cultivators and the Tai Bai sect's Daoist bright sword. Isn't that a good example? Senior Li Shoubai died in Meng country without knowing why, but the flame bamboo sword sect didn't mention anything about it. Sigh, I'd rather let the sword cultivators attack the three kingdoms of cultivation. That way, my blood feud can be avenged in the fastest way. Zhong Qingxiao sighed. It's okay, Qingxiao. Even if the sword cultivators don't fight with the Dao sect, as long as you cultivate well, there's still me. I'll also master the great yin-yang six directions sword spirit as soon as possible. Call you her too. When the three of us are pregnant, we'll go with you to take revenge. Zhong Yutong held Zhong Qingxiao's hand and said with concern, and if the Dao sect and the sword cultivators fight, who knows how many people will die? How many people die every year when the sword cultivators fight with millions of Meng mountains? But that's different. Zhong Yutong retorted, if the sword cultivators don't stop the soul cultivators, not only the Huan country, but even the three kingdoms of cultivation will have more people dying. Sigh, Yutong, didn't you say before that the sword cultivators will always fight? The sword cultivators and the Dao sect will always have disputes. The sect master's arrangement is just one step ahead. Zhong Qingxiao was about to say something when she heard a cough coming from the stairs. Zhong Qingxiao looked up and said to Zhong Yutong, forget it. It's not easy for you and me to come out. Let's not talk about those boring things. Okay, I know. Zhong Yutong nodded knowingly. She also looked at the stairs and said, I'll leave first. Go on with your work then. Zhong Yutong quickly walked down the stairs. A short foundation establishment cultivator with a thin face came up the stairs. It was Lan Li sect's Yin Meng. Yin Meng stared at Zhong Yutong, making Zhong Yutong's hair stand on end. Zhong Yutong's cultivation was not much worse than Yin Meng's, but she still lowered her head and quickly walked down the stairs with a red face. Hee hee. When Zhong Yutong was far away, Yin Meng walked up to Zhong Qingxiao and said with a smile, "Sect Master Zhong, oh Sect Master Zhong, this old man really admires you. This female sword cultivator is your enemy. She was captured by you with your own hands. She should have a deep-seated hatred for you." Who knew that she would actually have such deep feelings for you? From the looks of it, even if you killed your way to the Huan sword sect, she would still clean your sword for you. Tilda Zhong Qingxiao was not at all bothered by Yin Meng's lack of respect. She only smiled and said, "How can this Zhong's actions be compared to Vice Alliance Master Yin's plan? Vice Sect Master Yin is shouldering the hopes of the devil cultivators over there. Alas, speaking of this Yin is really ashamed. This time I went out to search for the whereabouts of that thing, but I still didn't find anything special." Although Yin Meng was ashamed, he didn't mean to be ashamed. He sat down and ignored Zhong Qingxiao. He raised his hand to pick up the teapot and poured a cup of tea. However, just as the tea entered his mouth, he spat it out again with a pu sound. He frowned and said, "Sect Master Zhong, what kind of tea is this? It's so bitter, is it for humans to drink?" "Oh, Vice Sect Master Yin," Zhong Qingxiao said with a smile, "this is tea used by mortals. How can it be compared to the spiritual tea that Vice Sect Master normally uses?" No wonder. Vice Sect Master Yin, this Sect Master is a little puzzled. I wonder what Vice Sect Master has been looking for all these years. It's so mysterious that even with Vice Sect Master Yin's ability, you can't find it. Zhong Qingxiao asked with interest. "Hehe, this thing. I'm afraid Sect Master Zhong has never heard of it. Even if this old man said it, it would be useless." Yin Meng replied with a smile. Zhong Qingxiao's expression didn't change at all as he said, "Vice Sect Master Yin, why don't you tell me? Perhaps this Sect Master has some good ideas." Yin Meng pondered for a moment and nodded. "Forget it. Since this old man is going to represent the demonic cultivators of the Cultivation Alliance to cooperate with the Heavenly Demon Sect, I can't let Sect Master Zhong know about this. Then this old man will tell Sect Master Zhong about it. This Sect Master is all ears." Zhong Qingxiao's face revealed a thirst for knowledge, while Yin Meng's face was filled with disdain. After Yin Meng drank another cup of tea and felt that he had shown off enough, he smiled and said, "I wonder if Sect Master Zhong has heard of the Grand Universe Teleportation Token?" "Ah!" Zhong Qingxiao's eyes lit up as she said enviously, "From what Vice Sect Master Yin is saying, the Grand Universe Shifting Token is a famous divine item from ancient times. Although I was born as an itinerant cultivator, I still know about it." Then he revealed a puzzled expression and asked, "Could it be Vice Sect Master Yin is looking for this item? However, according to this Sect Master's knowledge, this item has long been lost on the Dawn Rain continent. Why are you looking for it?" "Haha, that's because Sect Master Zhong is ignorant and inexperienced." Yin Meng did not conceal his disdain for Zhong Qingxiao at this time and said with a smile, "Sect Master Zhong is a rogue cultivator. Although you received the inheritance of my demon sect in the early years and secretly assisted Qing Fengmin of Heaven Forsaken, taking over the entire Heaven Forsaken after Qing Fengmin met with an accident, you have not been influenced by my orthodox demon sect master. In terms of knowledge, haha, it's indeed somewhat shallow." Zhong Qingxiao put on a rather ashamed look and said with a smile, "It's exactly because I feel that I'm not capable enough that I invited Vice Suzerain Yin to be the Vice Suzerain of Heavenly Demonic Sect. He even gave me advice and suggestions to grasp the direction of Heavenly Demonic Sect. Alas, this is also because Sect Master Zhong's feelings are hard to refuse." Yin Meng sighed and said, "Otherwise, with the current situation of Heavenly Demon Sect, this old man will definitely not get involved in this muddy water. Haha." Zhong Qingxiao smiled and did not say much. He asked again, "Vice Sect Master Yin seems to have not said why you are looking for the Grand Universe Teleportation Token." "Sect Master Zhong, you are wrong. It's not that it's impossible to use, it's definitely there." Yin Meng said proudly, That grand cosmos-shifting token was originally this old man's possession. However, because this item was already damaged, this old man got someone to refine it and there was a problem. That's why this item was accidentally missing. Ah! There was such a thing. Zhong Qingxiao was shocked and anxiously said, Vice Sect Master Yin, you are now my Heavenly Demon Sect's Vice Sect Master. This matter, you should at least let this Sect Master know about it, right? Haha, Sect Master Zhong misunderstood. This matter happened before this old man became the Vice Sect Master. It's not that this old man wants to hide it from the Sect Master. Yin Meng smiled. This Sect Master has admired the other demonic cultivators for a long time. Vice Sect Master Yin, please tell this Sect Master in detail. Zhong Qingxiao almost smiled apologetically. Haha, even if Sect Master Zhong didn't say it, this old man would have said it. This matter involves the cooperation between my Heavenly Demon Sect and the demonic cultivators of the Cultivation Alliance. In the future, this place will have to rely on Sect Master Zhong. Yin Meng smiled and said, actually, it's very simple. There are indeed very few Grand Universe teleportation tokens left in my Dawn Rain continent. The demonic cultivators of the Cultivation Alliance only obtained a damaged one. To come from the Cultivation Alliance, one must use a long-distance transfer array. Without this Grand Universe teleportation token, even nascent soul and spirit-severing cultivators don't dare to use the transfer array. -8. Chapter 2033. If we fiendish cultivators want to cross the millions of soul cultivators in Meng Mountains and arrive at the Three Kingdoms, we can only rely on this Grand Universe teleportation token. Yin Meng explained, so I've been looking for this item for the past few years. Vice Sect Leader Yin, you used this Grand Universe teleportation token to come to Xi? Zhong Qingxiao asked thoughtfully. This. Yin Meng's eyes turned slightly, and he hesitated for a moment before replying, yes, but because there was a problem with the transportation array, the Grand Universe teleportation token was also damaged. Therefore, I have been working on this matter. Then, Zhong Qingxiao asked again, but before he could finish, Yin Meng cut him off. I can't tell Sect Leader Zhong the location of the teleportation formation for the time being. Zhong Qingxiao's expression changed slightly, but he immediately laughed. I'm not asking about that. I want to know why I haven't found it yet. Is there any place in the Three Kingdoms that my Heavenly Demon Sect can't go? Hehe, Sect Leader Zhong feels great. Yin Meng laughed. There are indeed many places that my Heavenly Demon Sect can't reach. Hey, could it be the 3 sects of Xi? The 4 sects of Meng? Zhong Qingxiao asked curiously. That thing is so important, how could it fall into their hands? Yin Meng's face seemed to be slightly red as he answered, just as Sect Leader Zhong said, I asked someone to refine and restore that thing, but something went wrong and it fell into the hands of a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect. That disciple wasn't captured by my disciples at that time, and then, that disciple returned to the Imperial Thunder Sect. Even though I had some backup plans, I couldn't succeed. There was a time when I almost met him, but because I didn't know his true face, I let him escape. Hehe, speaking of which, Sect Leader Zhong was also present that day. Imperial Thunder Sect. Huh. Zhong Qingxiao was extremely sensitive about the Imperial Thunder Sect. When he heard this, he couldn't help but feel surprised. He had a hunch in his heart, but he still played dumb. It's related to me. Hehe, I really didn't know. Sect Leader Zhong, did you forget? Yin Meng smiled and was about to speak when another voice came from the stairs. Sect Leader, there's an urgent message from Lord. Zhong Qingxiao glanced at Yin Meng and said with a smile, please wait a moment, Vice Sect Master Yin, bring it up. Following Zhong Qingxiao's instructions, a disciple quickly walked over with a blood-red messaging charm. Hey! Flying blood message? Yin Meng was also slightly taken aback when she saw this. She asked curiously, the Heavenly Demon Sect actually has someone who knows this kind of communication method from the Devil Realm? As he spoke, he waved his hand and forcefully took the communication talisman from the disciple's hand. Vice Sect Leader. That disciple was shocked. It's fine. Zhong Qingxiao's face did not show any surprise at all. She waved her hand generously. You may leave. Vice Sect Leader Yin is the Vice Sect Leader of my Heavenly Demon Sect. Naturally, she has the right to look at the communication talisman. Yes, disciple understands. The disciple bowed his head and slowly retreated. Hey! Why is there nothing in this communication talisman? Yin Meng's demonic senses scanned the communication talisman and said strangely. Really? Zhong Qingxiao was also stunned. She did not reach out her hand and asked, which devil cultivator sent it? There's nothing in it. I can't tell. Yin Meng was a little embarrassed and handed the communication talisman to Zhong Qingxiao. Zhong Qingxiao frowned slightly. Without looking at it, she flicked her sleeve and hit the communication talisman. With a crack, the communication talisman was smashed into pieces. Hehe, since Vice Sect Leader Yin can't see anything, how can I see anything? I won't look at it. As Zhong Qingxiao spoke, she narrowed her eyes slightly. However, in just a moment, a trace of shock flashed in her eyes. It was as if she couldn't believe it. It was also as if she was lamenting. Sect Leader Zhong is really big-hearted. Yin Meng was surprised by Zhong Qingxiao's actions. He praised her and said, I was also impressed by Sect Leader Zhong's open-mindedness for the first time. I joined the Heavenly Demon Sect without hesitation. Yes, it was that time. Does Sect Leader Zhong still remember those disciples in Lingpei Mountain Villa who were not from the Lan Li sect? Oh, them. It seems to be 3 or 4 of them. Zhong Qingxiao said thoughtfully. That day, Vice Sect Leader Yin had just revealed his demonic cultivation method. I didn't know if Vice Sect Leader was a friend or foe, so I didn't dare to be careless. Since Vice Sect Leader killed them, I naturally had to let them go. Could it be? Hehe, it's that guy. Xiao Hua of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Yin Meng said regretfully, I didn't know at that time. I only found out later. Alas, fate really makes fools of people. Ayo. So it was me who ruined Vice Sect Leader Yin's plan. Zhong Qingxiao was a little panicked. She raised her teacup and said embarrassedly, let me toast Vice Sect Leader Yin as an apology. Hehe, the ignorant are not guilty. Yin Meng smiled and raised his cup. I know that sect leader captured Xiao Hua and forced him to tell me the whereabouts of the Grand Universe Shifting Token. Alas, what a pity. Zhong Qingxiao's tone was filled with endless loneliness. I'm afraid Vice Sect Leader Yin will never find Xiao Hua. Ah, why? He died. Yin Meng was shocked. Where did he die? Even if he died, his storage pouch must be found. There might be a Grand Universe Shifting Token inside. Xiao Hua died in Inkcloud Black Forest. Moreover, his corpse can't be found. Zhong Qingxiao waved her hand. A few disciples of my sect happened to be there. They sent news a few days ago. If Vice Sect Leader Yin didn't mention this, I wouldn't have known that Xiao Hua was so important. Xiao Hua died in Inkcloud Black Forest. Yin Meng was dumbstruck. He said in exasperation, why did that guy go there for no reason? A little aura-refining disciple really doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Now that he's dead, what should I do? Sect Leader Zhong, where is his specific location? Mo Bao. Zhong Qingxiao spread out her hands. Not to mention us, even if nascent soul cultivators died, it wouldn't be strange, right? Their corpses have long become Mo Bao's food, right? The things in their storage pouches became the prey of others several years later, right? Alas, if it were somewhere else, the storage pouches would be easy to deal with. Yin Meng was extremely regretful. He said dejectedly, but in Inkcloud Black Forest, storage pouches will corrode, and the things inside will be scattered in the Black Forest. How can I find them? If this matter is important, I can order my disciples to be careful in Inkcloud Black Forest in the future. Zhong Qingxiao said with a smile. Temph, what's the use of your aura-refining disciples? Yin Meng snorted. I have to go and see for myself. Fine. Zhong Qingxiao was not angry at all. She took out a jade slip, wrote something, and handed it to Yin Meng. Although this location is at the edge of Inkcloud Black Forest, Vice Sect Leader Yin should still be careful. -8. Chapter 2034. Alright, I'll take my leave. Yin Meng hurriedly bowed and quickly left the tea house. Zhong Qingxiao looked at Yin Meng's back and a faint sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Then, it was shrouded by sadness. He looked up at the gloomy sky where dusk was rising and half a red sun was hanging on the mountain top. Little junior brother, you still went. Sigh, you're just a little foundation establishment cultivator. Why did you go to Inkcloud Black Forest? Damn it, I only wanted to scheme against those two sword cultivators, you and the sword cultivator. Sigh, I know, isn't it your stupid flying sword? You want to get the sword spirit. You can tell me if you want it. I have the complete sword technique of the sword cultivator here. You can nurture the sword spirit again, you can even cultivate the flying sword again. Why did you have to go to Inkcloud Black Forest? Sigh, you're gone, you're going to leave so carefree, in this world, there's only junior sister left. What's the point of me living? What's the use of me scheming against the demon cultivators, the Taoist sect and the sword cultivators? Even if I killed those 3 nascent soul cultivators, who would be able to laugh with me in the end? Little junior brother, why didn't you stay in the Imperial Thunder sect to cultivate properly? Why did you run out? The last time I saw you, you were still a chi refining level 12 disciple. Who would have thought that in just a few years, you've also built your foundation? Do you know how happy I was when I heard that you've built your foundation? Although I don't know if you have anything to do with Master and Senior Brother's death. But you're still my little junior brother. I'd rather believe that you're innocent. Do you know how upset I am now? I only have you as my little junior brother in this life. There will definitely be no Shang Huaming in the future, and there will definitely be no junior brother. I was still thinking, the next time I see you, I'll scare you and let you see my cultivation. Do you know? Little junior brother, I'm now in the late stage of foundation establishment. I'll be able to condense my core soon. I was actually a peak late-stage golden core cultivator in my previous life. I never thought that on the day I met you, that bullshit condensed knowledge treasure was actually refined by me in my previous life. As she spoke, Zhong Qingxiao casually stretched her back. Her cultivation at the peak of the late foundation establishment stage was comparable to an early golden core cultivator. I've prepared a lot of good things for you. I also want you to quickly build your foundation. Zhong Qingxiao retracted her arm and withdrew her aura. She was once again a simple mid-stage foundation establishment cultivator. Apart from junior sister in the 100 Herbs sect, Shang Huaming only has you and me left. Who else can I dote on if not you? Little junior brother, what should I say to you? Even if you've built your foundation, it's nothing in my eyes. I have 10,000 ways to make you steadily improve. But, you were actually killed by Dowmaster Brightsword's flying sword. I can't save you even if I want to. From now on, I will be the only one in this world who will avenge Master and Big Senior Brother. I will also be the only one who knows the true reason behind Shang Huaming's destruction. I can't accept this. Zhong Qingxiao thought and muttered. Her eyes were filled with endless loneliness as she looked at the setting sun. It was as if there was only loneliness in the entire world. Although Zhong Qingxiao had unfathomable devil cultivation secret techniques and could quickly obtain news about Xiao Hua with Zhong Jihao's clone, she still couldn't know that the grieving Xiao Hua had already flown to the front of Haoming City. She stopped in midair and carefully observed the entire city. Senior. A voice sounded in front of Xiao Hua. It was a cultivator wearing the armor of Haoming City's city guard. Xiao Hua raised his head and looked at the city guard. The city guard hurriedly saluted. May I know how I can be of service to Senior? Is that so? Xiao Hua smiled. This was the first time he had entered the 7 major cities of the state of Xi and received such a high level of courtesy. Yes, the auction in this city is about to begin. The city lord is afraid that seniors who come from afar don't know the rules of our Haoming City, so he specially sent us here to wait. We will welcome any seniors who are above the foundation establishment realm at any time. The city guard replied respectfully. Well, okay. Let's talk about the rules of Haoming City first. This is also my first time here, so I don't want to offend Master Yarrow Hong, Xiao Hua said with a smile. Okay. The city guard also smiled. An approachable cultivator like Senior won't offend our Haoming City. Then, the city guard briefly explained the taboos of Haoming City and said, Senior, as long as you don't kill ordinary people and don't attack at will in Haoming City, these taboos are nothing. However, Xiao Hua frowned. You mean, in Haoming City, cultivators of different realms have fixed areas of activity? Cultivators of lower realms can't cross the boundary without the permission of cultivators of higher realms? Otherwise, if they are killed, won't your Haoming City take responsibility? Yes, Senior. In Haoming City, we, the city guards, naturally have to ensure the safety of all cultivators. However, if those low-level cultivators cross the bottom line of our Haoming City and offend high-level cultivators, our Haoming City naturally can't guarantee the safety of such cultivator. The city guard answered patiently. Moreover, according to the number of cultivators in our Haoming City, the designated area of activity is sufficient. If someone crosses the boundary, it must be intentional. Well, what about the ordinary people in Haoming City? Xiao Hua asked thoughtfully. Senior, you should know that those ordinary people are just doing things that we cultivators don't want to do, such as earning some hard-earned spirit stones. It's impossible for them to affect any cultivators. Such people are not few in our Haoming City. We naturally have to protect them from the harassment of unscrupulous cultivators. That's right. Xiao Hua clapped his hands and said, From this, we can see Master Yarrow Hong's generosity. I agree very much. Thank you for your understanding, Senior. The city guard smiled apologetically. Senior, if you want to lodge a complaint, you have to look for it yourself. If there really isn't one, you can find a city guard like me for help. The city guards and I are very happy to serve Senior. Well said. Xiao Hua nodded. After thinking for a moment, he asked, I want to send a message to a fellow Daoist. She's an Qi refinement disciple, but she should be with a nascent soul cultivator. Can I just send a communication talisman directly? Yes, there's no restriction on communication talismans in Haoming City. As long as there's a response from a nascent soul cultivator, Senior can go to their area. The city guard said with a smile. Xiao Hua smiled. He clapped his hand and took out a communication talisman. Under the urging of magic power, a red brilliance flashed and flew out of Xiao Hua's hand. Unfortunately, what made Xiao Hua slightly stunned was that the communication talisman didn't fly directly to the top of Haoming City. Instead, it turned in midair and flew directly behind Xiao Hua. Oh! Why did it leave the city? Xiao Hua's expression changed slightly. Could it be that something happened? Then, he cupped his hands slightly towards the city guard and flew out of the city. The city guard didn't think it was strange and went to another place to welcome other cultivators. Senior martial brother, Xiao Hua flew a distance away. When his divine sense passed by, a smile appeared on his face. At the same time, Shue's voice came again. Unexpectedly, Shue's face was a little thin. She left the two people behind her far away and flew towards Xiao Hua. Shue. Xiao Hua was delighted and reached out his hand with a smile. There were still some cultivators nearby. Shue didn't have the nerve to rush into Xiao Hua's arms. She only reached out her hand and impatiently held it, as if only the warmth in Xiao Hua's hand could make her feel at ease. Why did you come so late? Shue's heart was calm. She looked into Xiao Hua's eyes and asked with concern, I thought you'd be able to catch up to me in a dozen or so days at most. Who knew that it would take you almost a year? Hehe, didn't I say I'd give you a surprise? Xiao Hua said with a smile, Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you. I finally have the face to come back and see you. This concubine said before, this concubine doesn't want any surprises. This concubine only wants you to stay by this concubine's side. Shue said tenderly. She didn't care about Xiao Hua's so-called surprise at all and didn't ask a single word. Just as Xiao Hua was about to explain, he suddenly felt a strange gaze shooting at him from the side. This gaze was not the kind of bone-deep hatred, but it was a kind of faint hostility, a kind of slight disdain, which Xiao Hua was very sensitive to, and he was able to detect it. Who is it? Xiao Hua raised his sword-like eyebrows and looked in that direction. Sure enough, it was the two people who came with Xue Xue. One of them was the ugly Hua Furong. At this time, Hua Furong was very tactful and kept a distance of more than 10 zhong from Xiao Hua. Beside her, there was a male cultivator who looked very similar to her. His cultivation was around the middle stage of foundation establishment. A pair of big and small eyes stared straight at Xiao Hua. This gaze seemed to be spitting fire and full of jealousy. What's going on? Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. He turned his head and whispered to Xue Xue, "Is this male cultivator Hua Furong's brother?" Xue Xue's face was somewhat unnatural. She nodded and said, "Yes, this male cultivator is called Fire Qilin. His Hua Furong's cousin." Fire Qilin? He has the nerve to call himself Fire Qilin with that appearance. Xiao Hua almost laughed out loud. When I saw him for the first time that day, I was also this surprise. Xue Xue pursed her lips and smiled. However, this person's character can be considered good, even somewhat refined. His, somewhat similar to the so-called Confucian cultivators. Why is he looking at me like that? Xiao Hua whispered, "I don't seem to owe him any spirit stones, right?" This. Xue Xue was somewhat embarrassed. This guy seems to be a little, Xiao Hua was really stunned. Damn it, when I'm with you, I feel like I'm a flower stuck in cow dung. If this guy, then wouldn't he be? I really can't compare. Fire Qilin has a lot of etiquette. He only expressed some goodwill and didn't say anything. However, he's a foundation establishment senior. I also vaguely told Hua Furong some things. Presumably, he should be aware of it. Xue Xue whispered, "His cultivation is higher than yours. Don't cause trouble." 8. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.